Yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Dan Garodnick, Chair of the City Planning Commission, Director of the Department of City Planning. Welcome to today's review session of the City Planning Commission. Hope everybody had a relaxing and enjoyable weekend. We are joined today by Vice Chair Knuckles, Commissioners Benjamin, Cerullo remotely, Crowell, Dweck, Gold, Marine on Zoom, Osorio, and Rampersad. I want to just start off today by acknowledging the passing of Richard Ravitch, who was a tremendous, tremendous man, public citizen who gave so much to our city and our state. We all owe a debt of gratitude to Dick for his leadership and his commitment to New York over many decades. And on a personal note, I will never forget his friendship and his mentorship. May he rest in peace. On a lighter note, before we get to today's agenda, I would like to mention some highlights from the last couple of weeks. Earlier this month, the Manhattan Borough Board voted in favor of the City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality proposal, our plan to create clear rules to support the installation of renewable energy generation and transportation systems. I would like to thank Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine and all the Manhattan Council members and community boards for their support. We hope to see many more yeses over the next couple of weeks as this proposal makes it back to the Commission for a hearing this summer. I'd also like to thank everyone who attended the Department of City Planning's recent public information session on City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. This initiative would allow more businesses to locate near their customers, support business and industry growth, foster vibrant neighborhoods, and give businesses more certainty and predictability. If approved, City of Yes for Economic Opportunity would be the largest expansion of space available for small-scale clean manufacturing like ceramic makers, microbreweries, and coffee roasteries in New York City in over 60 years. It would also create a path for new corner stores within walking distance of more than 250,000 New Yorkers who currently lack access to local goods and services. These are just a couple of examples of the real-world positive impact this plan will have on New York City. We look forward to holding another information session on July 11th and starting the official public review this fall. City Planning also announced an early start to the Community District Needs process, where the city's 59 community boards prepare statements of need and identify funding priorities for their districts. This key part of the annual budget process helps inform neighborhood and infrastructure planning and the equitable delivery of services to communities citywide. In response to community requests, we're starting this process now in June instead of in August, giving boards more time than ever to collect input, prioritize requests, and to submit before the October 31st deadline. Moving to today's agenda, we are starting with our usual Monday review session, which will be followed by a special public meeting to vote on a couple of applications that are on deadline. So we need to make our decision now instead of on Wednesday when we would typically hold votes. For our review session agenda, we are going to start off with a special presentation from the Landmarks Preservation Commission and also following their presentation from staff of the Department of City Planning on the Linden Street Historic District proposal. Then we will have a couple of projects in Queens starting public review. First, details on a new residential project in downtown Jamaica, 166-11 91st Avenue, which would include 30 homes, of which around 30% would be income restricted and less than a block from the Jamaica bus terminal. Great example of transit-oriented development. We'll also learn about an authorization on 61st Avenue in Douglaston for height waivers to construct 2 buildings near Alley Pond Park. The first would have 125 homes, about 35 income restricted and medical offices. The second would be a long-term care facility with over 200 beds. We will also have an in-depth follow-up presentation from city planning staff and discussion on what we heard from our public hearing on Madison Square Garden's special permit for its continued operation, and the Department of City Planning's text amendment to improve conditions at the arena to ensure it is compatible with Penn Station's revamp. In particular, we have received letters from the applicant, Madison Square Garden, to further detail its commitments for public realm improvements, including some slightly updated designs and loading operations, as well as a vague commitment to work with the rail agencies. All of these are in your commissioners' packets. I will note that we have had productive conversations with all parties, though the applicant has quite a way to go here, even as the clock is running out, with a vote on July 12th. It is obvious to me that even with the commitments made in these letters, MSG still needs to go further, and we should think about what more we will require of MSG for both public realm and loading. MSG also needs to more unreservedly commit to actively collaborate with the rail agencies as they develop a new Penn Station. As a result of the extent of the unresolved issues, we cannot even begin to discuss the duration of the special permit. However, the number of issues that remain certainly will affect where we should land on that point, duration. And today, we will discuss our options to ensure that MSG remains squarely on the hook for its public realm and loading commitments if we, in fact, intend to approve a special permit of any length. You will hear much more on all of this as part of the excellent presentation that the Department of City Planning team has put together. So, to wrap up, we will have a vote today on our special public meeting on the expansion of York Studios, located at 1400 Story Avenue. This development would enlarge TV and film production in Soundview in the Bronx, adding around 280 jobs and creating new open space along the Bronx River waterfront with connections to Soundview Park. We were going to have a vote today on the Kings Highway self-storage proposal in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, but the applicant has withdrawn its proposal. I will note that their withdrawal came after the Department of City Planning communicated that we were going to recommend disapproval of this application. That is a lot to do today. Ryan, we've got a lot to do, so let us kick it off and get right into it. So, thank you.
Before we begin our regular agenda, we have a special presentation by Kate Lemos-McHale of the Landmarks Preservation Commission on the Linden Street Historic District.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Garodnick and Commissioners. Thanks for having me today to present the Linden Street Historic District. It was designated on May 9th by a unanimous vote, and this small historic district is a remarkably intact group of 32 brick and brownstone row houses built between 1885 and 1901. These distinctive row houses were designed by Brooklyn architects and represent a highly successful integration of late 19th century picturesque styles. It also represents the area's early residential development, and this architecturally and historically significant district stands out as a unified streetscape with a strong sense of place. Doesn't seem to be doing the trick.
Just say next slide, actually. I think
okay.
we're...
Sure, next,
yeah,
please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide.
Could we get the next slide, guys?
Okay.
There we go. Should be up now. All right, there's a disconnect between...
Oh, there we go. Okay, the historic district consists of row houses along the section of Linden Street between Bushwick Avenue and Broadway. And at our public hearing held on February 28th, 8 people testified in support of designation, including representatives of the Historic Districts Council, the Bushwick Historic Preservation Association, South Bronx Cares, and 5 individuals. 1 individual representing Open New York opposed designation. The Commission also received 6 letters from members of the Bushwick Historic Preservation Association in support, and we did not have letters in opposition. Next slide, please. The historic district is in the southern area of Bushwick and is the neighborhood's first historic district. Currently, there are 8 individual landmark designations in the vicinity as shown on the map, including freestanding houses and civic and religious buildings. LPC staff has studied the district carefully in the context of Bushwick Avenue and the neighborhood's late 19th and early 20th century development. Its distinctive row houses, united by the continuous nature of the streetscape and its intact historic character, truly make it distinct within the Bushwick area. Next, please. Bushwick is one of the original 6 towns of Brooklyn. It was chartered by the Dutch in 1661, became part of the city of Brooklyn in 1854, and remained mostly farmland through most of the 19th century. These 2 maps from 1880 and 1898 illustrate the rapid transformation of Bushwick in the late 19th century. Streets had been laid out in preparation for development by 1880, but little had been built by then except for scattered wood frame buildings and short rows of masonry houses. Once the Broadway elevated train began service in 1888, the opportunity for a thriving transportation and commercial corridor spurred nearby residential development, and within a decade, most blocks were filled with wood frame and masonry houses. By 1901, all of the row houses were completed within the historic district. Over the years, many of the houses shown in these historic maps have been altered or replaced, but those on Linden Street remain a highly intact collection. Next, please. The district was developed by Samuel Meeker, shown here, and later his family. He was a prominent lawyer and one of the founders of Williamsburg Savings Bank, and he built himself this grand house on the corner of Linden and Bushwick Avenues in 1852, and then developed the remaining lots on the block. This photo shows the house in 1923 and the Queen Anne-style row houses he developed in 1888 across Linden Street. His villa was demolished in the late 1920s, and later apartment buildings were built on that site that are not included within the historic district. Next, please. These Queen Anne-style brick, terracotta, and brownstone row houses are an impressive section of Bushwick, and they face Bushwick Avenue and go down about half the block of Linden. They were designed by Brooklyn architect Frank Keith Irving, whose work is represented in other Brooklyn historic districts. And the row is notable for its continuous bands of decorative terracotta, ornamental friezes, and parapets with ball finials, and has a particularly distinctive high Victorian end house with a mansard roof that's on the corner facing Bushwick. Next, please. Moving down the block towards Broadway, in the middle is a row of brick and brownstone houses that were built in 1885, designed by Edward F. Gaylor in the Neo-Grec style, which have characteristic features including incised lintels, bracketed sills, door hoods and cornices, and many of the high stoops retain their historic cast iron elements. Closest to Broadway are some brownstone houses with Renaissance revival details. Those were built in 1901. Next slide, please. And across Linden Street is an intact row of Romanesque and Renaissance revival style row houses with alternating projecting bays built from 1894 to 96. Architect and builder Charles E. Palmer combined 2 popular late 19th century styles in his design for the row, which featured distinctive Romanesque rough-faced stone facades, Renaissance revival style cornices, and generously sized front yards. And all of the stoops and most of the ornamental ironwork remain in place in this row. Next, please. The first residents along this section of Linden Street were predominantly white, middle, and working class families. After World War II, Bushwick's population decreased as residents left the city, and during the turbulent years in the 1970s and 80s, sections of Bushwick experienced unrest and decline that resulted in many lost buildings. In the 1990s and 2000s, government and community groups partnered to create new housing and improve services in the area, and the neighborhood has since attracted an influx of new residents from Central and South America, the Caribbean, Asia, and the Middle East. Today, Bushwick neighborhood has continued to experience ongoing revitalization, and Linden Street reflects the diversity and vitality of its surrounding neighborhoods. Next, please. Owners of these buildings have been excellent stewards, and remarkably, this historic district remains remarkably intact, standing out as an architecturally and historically significant residential block in Bushwick, with an impressive 19th century streetscape. The designation helps fulfill LPC's goals of equitable designations throughout the 5 boroughs and highlights the city's diversity, and we've had great community support. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this designation.
Great. I just have one technical one on the subject of the Romanesque and Revival style that you described.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more when you, and I think it was on slide 8, if it's possible to bring it up, you were describing the characteristics of each, and I just wanted to make sure that I understood them.
Oh, of course. So these are 2 styles, revival styles, popular in the late 19th century. The Romanesque typically has this more robust, rusticated stone. It's often known for having arched window openings and door openings. And then the Renaissance revival style is very classically influenced, and you can see in particular the cornice with the swags and the modillions is a very Renaissance revival style cornice. So it's an interesting kind of combination of these 2 styles here.
Renaissance revival. Yeah, Renaissance revival and Romanesque together, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Commissioner Gold.
Thank you. Super informative and helpful. Just one quick question. It looks like from the pictures that these homes are all pretty much in significantly the same condition as they were. Is that right, or have any of them been, sort of renovated, changed, or are they all kind of keeping those details which make it a pretty exciting potential district?
Yeah, exactly. That is one thing that really made it stand out, is how intact the buildings are. You do see some changes, like replacements of doors, although in this photo you can see the historic double doors are still there, but mostly replacements are limited to doors and windows. We had a couple, I think one of the houses has a solar canopy that's on the roof, and there's, some changes to areaways and fences, but mostly it's highly intact.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. McHale. We appreciate your being with us today and for sharing some of the details here about the Linden Street Historic District as proposed. And I believe, no, wait, sorry, there's a question. I didn't see you, Commissioner Goodrich.
I'm sorry, I have one quick question.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to, you mentioned that there's some people who were against it, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond. I think most of the, I think the so-called reason that people state that they're against it is that it spurs, makes the homes much more expensive. What is I just wanted to give you a response.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, we did have one person opposed, not from within the district, and it was mostly concerned with the thought that it may limit development of housing opportunities. And so I think I might respond to that as well as your question about cost, in that when we designate districts, we really carefully study the architecture and the merit. So it's about sort of finding very tight boundaries that define a distinct area. And so we kept very close here to the row houses, which were all built in a very short time period and really represent this history of development. And as we talked about, the architecture is very strong and very intact. When you think about cost, there have been lots of studies about that, and it's also hard to know, if, in comparison with doing work in a designated district, what someone would do to their house if it wasn't. But what we do know is that owning a landmark property does come with responsibilities. People have to work with us. But what I can say is that LPC doesn't require homeowners to make changes. they bring their proposal to us. And on the flip side, we don't prevent change. We really try to work with people to make the changes that they need to their property in a way that preserves its historic character. And we have a staff of experts that, you know, work very carefully. And there's so many row house districts that we have a lot of experience with that, and helping people find substitute materials or lower cost options is something that we try to do. You know, in some cases, the commission does require certain things like a level of quality of window matching the historic. We can also have flexibility in districts like this where we can do, you know, aluminum windows that are 1/1 to match what was historically, so that maintains a similar cost. But what we're really helping people to do is make the right decisions that will have good long-term impacts on the life of their building also. So that's also something that factors in. And then in terms of just sort of equity in housing, and we really do, as I said, try to keep our boundaries very tight. And we don't regulate use, and we don't sort of, it wouldn't impact the underlying zoning there. And so we are looking throughout the city for equitable representation in our districts, and communities do often come to us because they want to preserve the character. And so we really take all of that into account when we look at these. Did that answer, I hope? Okay. Yes.
The argument, oh, well, you know, you have this designation and then you can't knock it down and then build like 100-unit luxury building or whatever to house 100 people. What's really the importance of historic preservation over housing more people? It really just I think I'm really just asking as importance of the historic preservation, because that is one of the main, I think, counter arguments, which I don't agree with, but.
Right. Well, I think preservation and housing are both very important, and hopefully we can find ways to do both in a neighborhood. And so this district is very tight to these historic buildings that really are architecturally meritorious. And I think hopefully doesn't limit the building of more housing in the broader neighborhood.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ryan, I believe we now have a presentation from the Department of City Planning. Would you like to introduce that?
Yes, this is our first item. Officially, it's the pre-hearing review for this historic district designation in Brooklyn Community District 4, and Joelle Miller will present.
Joelle, hit that button on your mic and welcome.
The green there. There we go.
Hello. Okay, good afternoon. So I will be presenting a follow-up presentation from the Landmarks Preservation Commission to designate the Linden Street Historic District as a new historic district. The proposed district is in Bushwick in Brooklyn Community District 4. The district would consist of 32 brick and brownstone properties located along Linden Street in between Broadway and Bushwick Avenue. Broadway is a busy transit, mixed-use commercial and residential corridor. The Gates Avenue J&Z train station is less than a block away from the proposed historic district on the corner of Gates Avenue and Broadway. The historic district is located behind 3 mixed-use R6 and C43 lots along Broadway. 2 of the lots consist of 2-story commercial buildings, including a beauty store, Family Dollar store, hardware store, and the 3rd lot is currently vacant land. The portion of Bushwick Avenue to the right of the historic district is zoned mainly residential. The proposed district consists, again, of 32 brick and brownstone properties built between 1885 and 1901. The architecture represents 19th century Queen Anne, Neo-Greco, and Renaissance architectural styles. The historic district consists of 2 zoning districts, R6 and a sliver of C43. The surrounding area consists of a variety of residential and commercial districts and a special enhanced commercial district 4 along Broadway. The portion of the surrounding area zoned R6 is mainly northwest of the district and consists of a mixture of 2-story multifamily homes and 4-story apartment buildings. The portion of the surrounding area, Zone C43, is located on the southwest end of the historic district and extends along Broadway. Broadway consists of mixed-use 1 to 3-story commercial and residential buildings. The commercial spaces are occupied by fast food restaurants, cell phone service providers, clothing stores, pharmacies, and the U.S. Postal Office. In past neighborhood studies, there were recommendations to rezone Linden Street to mostly R6B, maintaining the current character of the street and increasing density within 100 feet of Broadway to a C4 4D district. Department staff would like to note that the historic district would still allow for increased density along Broadway. Department of City Planning staff is unaware of any conflict with the zoning resolution. Projected public improvements or any plans for development, growth, improvement, or renewal within the historic district or surrounding area. According to Section 7479 of the zoning resolution, no transfer of development rights is permitted from any structure within a historic district, and all landmark buildings within historic districts are eligible to apply for the use in bulk waiver, according to Section 74711 of the zoning resolution. Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me see if there are questions for you. Commissioner Benjamin.
Just one quick question. Are there much unused development rights on any of, for instance, if someone wanted to add a floor or bump out the kitchen in the back, are there development rights available on most of these lots for them to do so and still stick within the 2.43?
I'm going to ask for an answer.
We'll have to double check on that because, yeah, it's all R6 today, so we haven't done a full FAR analysis for each site. But
And are you going to be bringing us a zoning change for the R6B that you spoke of?
So if, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it gets the historic designation, then it wouldn't go to R6B. But some studies that we had done in the past, we were looking at this area and we thought R6B would be most appropriate. But we also found in other studies that it would be great to preserve any type of and push historic designation. So this is also within line with past studies we've done.
Okay, thank you. If you could just get back to me with a quick, just if the homeowners need to, do they have some flexibility in pushing out in any direction? Or is it really the envelope so tight
Right.
that what they have is what they'll have?
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rampersad.
Sorry, thanks for the presentation. Just in line with the question from Commissioner Benjamin, does LPC or the department track how many open DOB permits are within these buildings that are going to be in the landmark district? Like, do we track like how many are currently being altered right now, or any being altered with extensions in the rear or anything like that? Do we know, or you do? Okay. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to, just for the benefit of the recording, just relay the answer? Or do you want to come up and do it again, just so we can? I know we could all hear you, but if somebody were, the thousands who are watching us presently online need to know.
Yes, yes.
Multitudes. Go ahead. I'm sorry. If you don't mind just doing that one more time.
No problem. Yes, we are able to track DOB permits, and we do. Our calendared buildings are flagged in the DOB system, so we do. And then once designated, once calendaring, people come to us once something's calendared because of the 40-day clock, and so we do track all of that as well. And I also don't know the specific what's available in FAR, but I believe these are mostly 2.5-story buildings. And so depending on that, expansion into the rear or minimally visible on the roof could be possible in a district.
One more.
Commissioner Benjamin.
One more quick question. As the chair said, we're going to be looking at the City of Yes shortly. If an owner wanted to put solar panels, et cetera, on the roof, and we're certainly encouraging them to do so, would they need a full commission vote, or is that something that a staff approval can, how would that work?
We are currently updating some of our rules to allow the staff more ability to approve things based on standards that have been set with past approvals having to do with solar panels. So it may depend a little bit on how visible and where, but the staff is able to approve minimally visible, and I think working with setting it back from the street facade, that's also possible maybe for...
Thank you very much.
I just want to add one thing. Attending community board meetings, the community board 4 definitely wants a sense of ownership, and they're like OG Bushwick Indians. They've been there since the beginning, and they're experiencing gentrification, and so there's a lack of historical designation sites in this area, and so like this would definitely, I feel like, make them proud and feel like they have something that's protected in theirs. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick Zola and, calculation. It looks like there on many of the sites, there's still some FAR. It's like 1.5, 1.8 FAR, and so they could add another story if they bump it back or in the back. Yeah. This wouldn't shrink wrap.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ryan, this one we're going to pick up for a public hearing on Wednesday.
That's right.
Let's move on to our next item.
All right. The second item on our agenda is a certification of a special permit and the referral of a zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 12, and our presenter is Andrew Seguin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon, Andy.
This is a private application by Amar 16611 91st LLC for a special permit pursuant to Zoning Resolution Section 115-60 and a corresponding text amendment mapping mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH. These actions would facilitate the development of a new 13-story mixed-use building with 28 dwelling units, of which approximately 8 would be income restricted. The project area is located at 166-11 91st Avenue in Jamaica, Queens Community District 12. The project area is located in downtown Jamaica, one of the borough's central business districts and South Queens' primary retail and office hub. Jamaica Avenue, downtown Jamaica's main commercial corridor, is less than a block south of the project area. The project area is a half block east of Merrick Boulevard, a primary thoroughfare that runs from Hillside Avenue to the north and continues southeast to the Belt Parkway at the Nassau County border. The project area is proximate to several key transit nodes. The 169th Street F train station is located 0.3 of a mile north of the project area on Hillside Avenue, and the Jamaica Center E, J, and Z train station is located a 10-minute walk southwest of the project area on Archer Avenue. The downtown Jamaica Transit Hub, which provides access to the subway, Long Island Railroad, and JFK Air Train, is approximately 1 mile southwest of the project area. The Jamaica Bus Terminal is one of South Queens' primary bus hubs and is located less than a block north of the project area on Merrick Boulevard. CUNY York College is located approximately 0.4 of a mile southwest of the project area, and Rufus King Park, downtown Jamaica's largest public open space, is located 0.6 of a mile west of the project area. The surrounding area is predominantly developed with a mix of mid-rise commercial, shaded in red on the map, mixed use, shaded in orange, and multifamily residential, shaded in dark yellow buildings. Jamaica Avenue, located 1 block south of the project area, provides a wide variety of regionally serving retail and office uses, including department stores and major government offices. There are several community facilities in the immediate vicinity, colored in blue on the map, including a central branch of the Queens Public Library, 1 block north of the project area, and a house of worship directly adjacent to the project area. The project area is mapped with a C42 zoning district in 1961 and was rezoned to the current C45X district as part of the 2007 Jamaica Plan, which also established the special downtown Jamaica district on a 360-block area. The rezoning sought to increase densities in transit-rich parts of downtown Jamaica and expand affordable housing opportunities and promote commercial growth. The rezoning from a C42 to a C45X district increased the project area's permitted residential and commercial density and decreased its parking requirement. Shaded in light blue on this map or outlined in, or shaded in teal on this map, the proposed development site is located on block 9796 and comprises the entirety of lot 47, totaling approximately 3,442 square feet. The development site is wholly owned by the applicant and has been vacant since 2020 after a fire severely damaged the three-story residence that originally existed on the site. The development site is the only portion of the project area subject to the special permit. Depicted with the solid black outline, the project area is approximately 3,600 square feet and encompasses the MIH boundary, which includes the entirety of the development site and sliver portions of two neighboring lots. The MIH boundary does not cover a large enough area to compel these neighboring lots to provide income-restricted housing. Lot 63, located adjacent to the east of the development site, is approximately 100,000 square feet and comprises almost half the block's total land area. The lot is currently under construction and is planned to be a 12-story mixed-use building with approximately 600 residential units, of which approximately 150 would be income-restricted. Lot 53, located directly to the west of the development site, comprises approximately 17,000 square feet and is currently improved by a two-story house of worship. Depicted with the black outline on this map, the project area is located on 91st Avenue. 91st Avenue is a 40-foot wide street that runs east to west through the middle of the block and dead ends at the eastern edge of the development site's lot line. The rest of the block is bounded by Merrick Boulevard to the west, 169th Street to the south, 90th Avenue to the north, 169th Street to the east, 90th Avenue to the north, and Jamaica Avenue to the south. This photo looks northeast from 91st Avenue towards the development site. The entrance to the proposed development will be located at the foreground of the image. This photo looks east towards the terminus of 91st Avenue. The development site is located on the left, and the 12-story under construction building will be located beyond the green fence at the dead end. This photo looks west down the 91st Avenue towards Merrick Boulevard. The development site is located on the right of the image behind the green fencing. A two-story house of worship is adjacent to the development site, and a four-story department store is across the street. The applicant is proposing to build a 13-story plus cellar, 139-foot tall mixed-use building. This building would comprise a total of 20,649 square feet of floor space and 28 dwelling units, of which approximately 8 would be income restricted. In addition to the residential use, the development is proposed to contain a 1,537 square foot community facility space, which would occupy parts of the ground floor and the cellar. Floors 2 through 13 would be occupied by residential uses comprising 19,112 square feet. The proposed development's floor area ratio is 6.0. The proposed development does not include spaces for car parking, as the floor space is required or is below the requirement threshold that would require parking per the underlying zoning district regulations. This map depicts the proposed development's ground floor plan. Entrances to the building's residential, shaded in yellow, and community facility, shaded in blue spaces, would be provided at the front of the building along 91st Avenue. The applicant has proposed that the community facility space serve as a medical office, although a specific tenant has yet to be identified. The community facility space also partially occupies part of the cellar space. In addition to these uses, 1,070 square feet of landscape open space would be provided in the rear of the building. This space is proposed to be used as a recreational space for the building's residents. The curb cut that currently exists at the front of the site would be removed as no parking is proposed. For clarity, the diagram shown here has been rotated to look east down 91st Avenue. The proposed development sets back after 9 stories at an elevation of 97 feet before rising to a maximum building height of 139 feet. The special permit would allow for a building with a maximum height of 145 feet. To facilitate the development, the applicant is seeking a CPC special permit pursuant to Section 115-60 of the zoning resolution. The development site is on a lot with 44 feet of frontage located on a 40-foot wide portion of 91st Avenue, and zoning resolution section 23-692 restricts the heights of buildings with less than 45 feet frontage on narrow streets in C45X districts. In this case, the proposed development's maximum building height could not exceed 40 feet. To seek relief from this restriction, the applicant is seeking a special permit included in the Special Downtown Jamaica District's regulations. The special permit allows the CPC to permit modification of bulk or floor area regulations for lots within the special district. The applicant is seeking the special permit to waive the regulations imposed by Section 23-692, allowing a development to be consistent with the street wall and maximum building height regulations of buildings in C45X districts not located on narrow streets. As mentioned in the previous slide, the special permit would allow for a maximum building height of 145 feet. To be clear, the special permit would not allow for development taller than what the underlying zoning regulations would permit on a wider lot. No other lot in the immediate vicinity would be subject to this particular regulation. To avail of the special permit, the CPC must find that the proposed development meets a series of findings. In particular, the proposed development must aid in achieving the general purposes and intent of the special district, encourage a lively pedestrian environment, or utilize a special permit because it is the only feasible way to meet the development's programmatic requirement, enhance bulk distribution on the lot, permit adequate access to light and air on the surrounding area, and relate harmoniously to the surrounding area's character. In addition to the special permit, the applicant is proposing a zoning text amendment to map MIH on the site pursuant to option 1 or option 2. Shaded in dark gray on this map, the MIH boundary would be coterminous with the project area, encompassing an area slightly greater than the development site. The portion of the boundary on the adjacent lots is too small to compel mandatory inclusionary housing. The applicant intends to utilize option 2, which requires 30% of the residential floor space to be income restricted at an average of 80% of the area median income, or AMI. This action would result in approximately 8 income restricted units on the development site. For context, the AMI for the local area is approximately 56,000, which is lower than the borough all, which has an AMI of approximately 72,000. To summarize, Amar 16611 91st LLC is seeking a special permit and zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of a 13-story mixed-use building with 28 residential units, of which 8 would be income restricted, and 1,537 square feet of community facility space. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Great, thank you, Andy. In 1 second, I'm going to go to Vice Chair Knuckles. Let me just ask one to kick it off. So we're at certification here, so obviously there's plenty of time for us to explore this question with the applicant. But so we've got a 40-foot wide 91st Avenue. Existing rules say if you're building on a narrow street, you can't, in an R7X district in this part of Jamaica, you can't build higher than the width of the street that you're on. So that would be 40 feet. Special permit here is to give relief to that rule, allow them to go up to 125 or 145 with MIH, 145 feet tall. One of the findings that you noted was relating harmoniously to the surrounding area. Can you just say a little bit more about how that works here, or how this building could meet that finding? Like, what is it about this that might, as we go through this process, allow us to make that finding?
Yeah, you could probably look at it from a couple different ways, and I'll also refer you to the statement of findings that the applicant submitted as part of their application. One argument could be thinking about the existing developments or the developments that are under construction, such as the 12-story building that's next door, which will be maybe about 15 feet lower than this proposed development. And then you can also think about what the existing zoning could permit in terms of height, right? So the building even directly to the left of it, although it's a 2-story building that's a house of worship, hypothetically, as of right, it could go up to a similar height to what we're seeing here with the special permit.
And we recently announced that the Department of City Planning, in partnership with local elected officials and others, we were going to embark upon a neighborhood planning process to do a broader rezoning plan for Jamaica. How would this, as far as, just to set the stage for us a little bit, since we're going to have some months here of planning work and also certification through ULURP here of this proposal, how might this relate to a broader plan for the Jamaica area? Was there anything about this that would be inconsistent with what might come down the pike for a Jamaica plan?
Yeah, so we're still in the very preliminary stages. We haven't seen any sorts of proposals in terms of specific zoning districts or anything like that. But what we could say is that for this particular development, downtown Jamaica is one of Queens' primary central business districts. As of right, we wouldn't expect, the permitted floor area ratio to necessarily decrease. And then what we would also say here is that it would still likely be subject to the special permit because of the lot condition that currently exists. In other words, you wouldn't see much of a change in the issue that the applicant is facing, no matter what the zoning was, potentially, depending on the district.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Vice Chair Knuckles?
Thank you, Chair. The question actually that I had is one that you addressed regarding compatibility with the immediate surroundings. So the white massing to the rear of the rendering is the project, or would be the project that's under construction right now, the 12-story?
Hypothetically, it should be, but I think we're going to ask the applicant to provide an updated rendering reflecting the neighboring development's proposal from a massing perspective. So what the neighboring development is proposing is something that's 12 stories.
Yeah.
Looking at the DOB filings for it, right up to the lot line they're looking to build, but the portion that's right up to the lot line is going to be, I think, 14 feet tall. And then after, I think, something like 20 or 30 feet, it's going to step up to that 12-story portion.
Well, that would be helpful because that would give it more context.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll note it to the applicant team for the pre-hearing review.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Rampersad?
Thank you for the presentation. Just two quick questions. I didn't see it in our briefing package, but if they can provide floor plans for us for the building.
Sure.
And the other thing, with the downtown Jamaica, you have to get DEP approval, and I know it's a strenuous process. It's like you got to be a rocket scientist when you do those drainage plans. I just happened to notice on the survey they only have a sanitary sewer, so I'm just curious how they're going to handle the stormwater runoff for this building. So it just, when it comes back to us, if they can tell us their plan for it. Are they going to bring in the sewer, or are they, I know it was a little bit out of the height and setback, but I'm just curious.
For sure, yeah, we'll note it for the applicant to bring forward. Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, thanks, Andy. This item is now certified, and we will move on to our next item on today's agenda.
The third item on our agenda is a post-referral review of an authorization in Queens Community District 11, and our presenter, Scott Solomon.
Welcome, Scott.
Great. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I just want to clicker working. Great. Fantastic. So the applicant is Douglaston Realty Associates, LLC. They're requesting a CPC authorization to facilitate a dual building development that includes a long-term care facility and a residential building with medical uses that would penetrate the maximum height regulations of the underlying R4 zoning district. Development site is located in the Douglaston neighborhood of Queens Community District 11. The development site is a 122,000 square foot lot that fronts 61st Avenue, a 80-foot wide street. Approximately 550 feet west is Douglaston Parkway, a primary north-south thoroughfare. And 400 feet north of that intersection is the right-of-way of the Long Island Expressway, a major west-east arterial. There are 4 local bus lines that have stops at Douglaston Parkway. The development site is a deep rectangular-shaped interior lot with approximately 150 feet of frontage on 61st Avenue on the northern portion of the lot and extends approximately 816 feet deep. It is located entirely in R4 zoning district, where the proposed uses, a long-term care facility, residential uses, and community facility uses are all allowed as of right. R4 zoning districts limit buildings to 35 feet, although a long-term care facility or LTCF are allowed to rise to 45 feet. The site has been unimproved for years. There has been significant erosion over the years. Previous owners have tried to secure the fill from further erosion. Above the photo on the left, we're looking from the mall to the west, and photo 2 on the right is looking from 61st Avenue. Site currently sits in approximately 45-degree sloping terrain that gradually slopes upwards from the shopping center to the west, and further uphill, again, is this Douglaston public golf course. Further west, from west to east, is approximately 80-foot change in elevation. The proposed authorization would facilitate development of a new mixed-use dual building development totaling 242,000 square feet of floor area and 191 off-street parking spaces. 184 are required. The development has a proposed FAR of 1.99, just below the 2 that is permitted, and a proposed maximum building height of 103 and 123 feet for buildings A and B, respectively. Building A consists of 108,000 square feet of floor area, including 90,000 square feet of residential floor area and 18,000 square feet of medical use floor area. It would rise to 8 stories, or 103 feet above the base plane, and contain 126 dwelling units. After a 31-foot front yard, 18 feet required, a street wall of approximately 62 feet above 61st Avenue is proposed before rising to 103 feet. After the areas below grade would include amenity space, mechanical space, and accessory off-street parking shared with the other building. Building A has proposed FAR of 0.74, and the applicant is pursuing 421A tax abatement, which would result in approximately 32 to 38 income-restricted dwelling units out of the proposed 126 total. And Building B is a 151,000 includes 151,000 square feet of floor area, would rise to 10 stories, 123 feet above the base plane, and contains a proposed 203-bed long-term care facility with a mix of studios and 1-bedroom units located on floors 1 through 10. Applicant is also intending to provide a free private bus shuttle service to the local Douglaston Long Island Railroad Station, which is about a 5-minute drive north, and that will be being made available for future residents and employees. Above is a site plan. You can see the applicant is able to preserve a significant amount of existing vegetation and topography with a proposed 214-foot rear yard. Again, 30 feet is required. The applicant is able to propose a building that still maximizes its floor area while providing a smaller footprint, which is accomplished by these two taller buildings. The 191 parking spaces would be located at 2 subcellars and be accessible from 61st Avenue via a single 39-foot curb cut, which would act as a 2-way driveway that would drive alongside the eastern portion of the lot to the rear of the building, where there are dedicated drop-off and pickup lanes. A 76-foot FDNY turnaround is provided before vehicles continue to the ramp into the subcellars. The applicant is requesting the CPC authorization to first allow Building A to increase the street wall height to 62 feet, which represents a waiver of 38 feet, and to increase the building height to 103 feet, a waiver of 68 feet. Building B would increase the building height to 123 feet, representing a waiver of 78 feet. A building that would comply with building height would be accomplished with a larger, deeper footprint. One of the particular concerns that brought the applicant to the agency is that in order to have a functional long-term care facility is to keep the hallways shorter, which they say are more conducive for a care facility, which requires centrally located care stations. Otherwise, a building would result in these long cruise-length hallways that make operating care facility difficult. The residential building with income-restricted units also seeks relief. Also provides easier sighting onto a difficult ascending topography while minimizing the appearance of additional height from 61st Avenue. Per the applicant, the concentrated floor area in greater height allows for the preservation of existing topography and vegetation as much as feasible while facilitating productive uses on vacant property. For the applicant, the increased density is designed in a way to preserve view corridors as much as possible, as the building hillside are primarily visible from the west, which is lower in elevation. And while the Douglaston Golf Course further uphill, and even the tree lines alongside the perimeter of Douglaston are just above or about the height of the proposed building. In addition to the applicant's perspective of meeting the preservation requirements of the first finding, they also contend that the proposed waivers of the lease modification required to achieve the proposed development. The applicant notes the particular site conditions, constraints, given the significant grade changes across the entirety of the property. They believe that they have limited the size of the floor plates to avoid dramatically changing the topography of the property, and that they have limited lot coverage to 28%, minimizing the disruption, again, of the topography and vegetation called out in the findings. The full findings are addressed by the applicant and included in your package. Here we have axometric waiver drawings included in your briefing package, where the red lines have been added to distinguish where the height waivers begin. Building A on the left, again, 38 feet in waiver for the street wall, 68 feet for the building height. And then building B on the right, 78 feet waiver for that building. Here's an illustrative rendering. This is viewing the site as one we be traveling along traveling east on 61st Avenue. Here is a comparison view of someone traveling west on 61st Avenue, the existing condition on the right, a rendering on the left. However, the view here, again, is being obstructed from the significant tree canopy coverage that lines the perimeter of Douglaston Golf Course. And here we have another view, a comparison view looking from 244th Street, which intersects with 61st Avenue, just to the east of the development site. Here we have a section waiver drawing with residential on the left, LTCF on the right. Here we zoom in on that building on the left, building A. Again, the red line distinguishing where the height waivers begin. Building B, again, distinguishing the height waivers. So the application was referred to Community Board 11 for 45 days on May 17th, 2023. CB voted to disapprove the application 25-9, with concerns to height impacting the neighborhood character being a primary concern. Additionally, there was concerns from CB members relating to the engineering feasibility of the project, the impact to future erosion on the property, and concerns related to the applicant's plans to manage stormwater runoff on the property. The applicant responded that the building itself would serve as erosion control, that the site maintains significant permeable surface area, and incorporates permeable landscaping into proposed retaining walls. And it also includes significant on-site stormwater storage. In addition, the building would have to seek and comply with a DEP-issued permit, along with all other building permits to ensure building and safety code compliance. Those in favor were receptive to the job generation and housing production. One CB member, a local practicing architect, particularly appreciated the design and the manner in which it fit into, or designed to fit into the difficult terrain. I believe that the building would be a positive addition to the area. I just want to note that this non-ULIP application, authorization, and review ends with the City Planning Commission. We also want to note that the applicant had begun this process in 2019, where they presented this to the community board. It was a taller, longer footprint at the time. There's been a few iterations, but they really were trying to seek this minimum modification. They continued to shrink or expand the footprint to fit tighter into the building footprint to preserve the topography vegetation. So that's something they really responded to the community board throughout the process over the past few years. And with that, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I see a couple of questions coming. Before I go to them, let me just ask one. One of the findings in the authorization is that this is the least modification required to achieve the purpose for which it would be granted. Correct. Can you say a little bit about, why the applicant feels this is the minimum change required in order to achieve the goals here?
Yeah, so the proposed degree of modification is distinct to the project being proposed. They have taken one thing that's really been a constraint on the property is the slope of of the site itself, obviously. So overall, the goal is to try to retain as much of the topography and vegetation as possible. One thing that they note is the significant rear yard. So that one thing that does is preserve vegetation topography, but it also maintains visual corridors to as much as possible. The front yard exceeds the required 18 feet, also to a degree that they believe is the least modification that would facilitate the proposed housing production and LTCF. So it's really trying to get as much of a reduced footprint, but also producing the as-of-right housing production and community facility uses that are already allowed.
Thank you. Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you. Two questions. You mentioned that they were going to make use of the 421A program.
Yeah.
Do you know if they have a footing in the ground yet?
Yeah, they've said they've met the criteria for those footings.
Okay. And the next question is, what's the closest neighbors, residential neighbors to this, in distance, perhaps you can?
Sure. So I'm just going to, the aerial above, so we're looking north-south primarily here. So there's these garden apartments to the north. They're actually raised. I don't think this photo itself gives it justice, but there's quite elevation change here. So those garden apartments are raised up, looking downwards. And then to the south is also R4 district. These are 1 to 2 family attached homes that are at a lower grade. I don't know if one of these has a view of that site necessarily. The building itself would be in view, but the significant rear yard shifts that view significantly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Goodrich.
Thank you. Following up on the 421A, there have been many developments that they've had their affordable housing to the 421A, and the problem is the income requirement sometimes is so high that it's not even really affordable. It starts at $80,000, and so I guess what I'm wondering is if we have a sense of what the affordable housing here would look like, the income requirements. I don't know about the rent, but I more so care about like the income, the AMI.
Yeah, so they have noted that a range between 32 and 38, so it's representing 25 to 30%. So there's 3 primary options that I'm aware of with 421A. So they don't note a specific option that they're meeting. So I can follow up, see if they made further progress on the option that they view as preferred here.
Okay.
But yeah.
Sorry if you had that in your present. I didn't see it, so I was sure.
I don't know if I spoke of it,
okay.
The range, but I did not speak about the options and what specific 421A criteria they're going to be meeting.
Yeah.
But I could follow up with, I think they have some more details on that.
That would be great, because I think I think everyone knows that's my pet peeve.
Sure, of course.
And then I guess we might hear more, but I'm going to ask anyway, because sometimes at the hearings, people don't necessarily show up to the...
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so there is no public hearing for authorization. So the public, this is a post-referral, sorry. But I can follow up before the vote would occur with the applicant.
So I was going to ask, do you have any sense as to why the community board recommended disapproval?
So I will note that it wasn't an even split.
25.
Yeah, so their primary concerns were related to general neighborhood character concerns. The height itself was explicitly brought up, even though the explicit relief being sought. But there was a lot of skepticism about just the feasibility of building here from sort of layman engineers to it. So they were concerned about whether or not it could be built here, if it would contribute to future erosion here in the future, whether stormwater runoff could be managed properly here. So those are the primary issues regarding feasibility, stormwater runoff, and the height. So they had engineers on hand for the CB hearing. They talked about in detail some of their on-site stormwater storage they're going to be holding here. A lot of the building landscaping includes these berms, or I should say retaining walls, that really increase the permeability here to retain stormwater on-site and control erosion here. So that was the primary concerns, was future erosion, questioning even the feasibility of the project, and I would note there was concerns about employment generation here, bringing traffic, housing. But something the applicant noted is the housing production density, employment density here is unchanged in the R4 district. You're essentially building a taller building beyond the envelope that is permitted. So none of those uses or bulk are seeking relief. It's just the height to fit it in.
It's 8 stories, right?
So 8 stories for the residential building on the foreground or closest 61st Avenue, and it's a 10-story LTCF to the rear or southern portion of the lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Benjamin?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I was wondering about Building B, which is going to be a community facility with sleeping accommodations. Is this going to be a regional facility? Is there a demonstrated need for this type of facility with the population from this community board, or is this a larger, more regional facility?
So one thing I will note is that from this process, I've learned that the 200-bed number is a number that most of these LTCFs try to hit. It's sort of a minimum number to make them feasible. During their public hearing, the applicant presented some of the demographics. It's a large senior population. But they also noted that CB11 that this is located in, I think, has 2 long-term care facilities, proper LTCFs, in the area. So the applicant has discussed some of the need here. And primarily beginning with the lack of facilities available in CB11, Northeast Queens generally, and the large senior population. It was something that they really was honing in on.
And are they going to be running it themselves, or are they going to have to basically give the management to a company that specializes in long-term care facilities?
Yeah. So the applicant, this is LTCF is the sort of their business. They have several operating facilities in the city and the region. At least I know of one in that they operate in. I think I don't know if you call it Hillcrest or Hollis neighborhood. They also the operators themselves were at the public hearing. The individual who will be managing the building, but they're looking to build and operate themselves. I can't speak to the housing portion of it, but they also do have significant development history of residential housing development, excuse me.
So they will be self-managing both?
Certainly the LTCF. I could reach out about the housing production portion.
Okay, thank you and is this going to be a market rate long-term care, or is this going to be a subsidized or government subsidized run?
So this actually is a private pay facility. They would, from their words, would love to be able to accept Medicaid and Medicare facilities, but because of certificate of need regulations in the state of New York, they cannot get a certificate to operate a facility that could take on subsidized patients.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Knuckles?
Douglaston Development,
The applicant is the applicant itself is Douglaston Realty Associates, but Marks Development is also what they're known as.
Okay.
All right. Oops. Thank you, Commissioner Goodrich.
Is it? I'm trying to find it, but is it near public transit? It looks. I'm somewhat familiar with Douglaston, although I've never been there. I know it.
So we generally will use the 600-foot radius as a surrounding area. Just beyond that 600 feet on Douglaston Parkway to the west, there's 4 local and express bus lines. The nearest heavy rail, is the Douglaston Long Island Railroad Station, which is about a 5-minute drive to the north. I believe there are connections from those bus routes to the north, but there is no subway transit, but there is significant bus transit just outside the radius.
Okay.
It is a primarily auto-dependent neighborhood.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to schedule this one for a vote. Thank you very much, Scott. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Ryan, let's move on to number 4.
Yep. The 4th item on our agenda is a non-ULURP review to cancel a restrictive declaration and Staten Island Community District 1. And presenting to the Commission for the first time is Vincent Giordano.
All right, Vincent, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be before you today. So this is a relatively straightforward application at 385 425 Bay Street, located in Staten Island's Community District 1, which is the North Shore Stapleton neighborhood. Next slide, please. So the applicant is Parisi Bay Street LLC. It's a private company. The requested action is a legal document action to cancel an existing restrictive declaration from 1983, which limits all development for these two particular zoning lots to use group 6, commercial small retail establishments. And on the right, you can see the two lots in question. 385 Bay Street corresponds to lot 65, which is the lot towards the north. And then 425 Bay Street corresponds to lot 53, which is the lot directly underneath it. Next slide, please. So prior to 2019, the old zoning was M11. It was a heavy manufacturing area. And the applicant at that time, the owner of the property at that time, pursued a special permit pursuant to ZR Section 74922, which permits commercial and small retail establishments in M1 districts. However, in 2019, the area was rezoned as part of the Bay Street Corridor Special District rezoning, which rezoned the M11 underlying zoning into R6 with a C23 commercial overlay. And the subject lots are in the red box. Next slide, please. So the restrictive declaration, as I stated, is from 1983. It was coterminous with a special permit pursuant to ZR Section 74922 for certain retail establishments. And as I stated, it restricts, as per the restrictive declaration for the special permit, all development to use group 6, which is commercial and retail uses. It also required certain commitments as per this development, which the property owner has honored. One of them is a bus shelter on Bay Street, a parking lot landscaping plan, as can be seen in the red box in the center, as well as widening of Bay Street to its full mapped width of 80 feet. Next slide, please. So in a short summary, this is a legal document action to cancel a restrictive declaration in its entirety, which restricts all development on the site to commercial retail use group 6, despite the rezoning to R6 C23 as per the Bay Street Corridor Special District rezoning, which seeks to boost walkability and denser development in the area and also promote mixed-use development. And as I stated, the underlying zoning seeks to promote this mixed-use development. However, the restricted declaration prevents that from taking place. I am open to any and all questions that the Commission may have.
Great, thank you very much. Vincent, let me just make sure that I have clarity on this one. So the restrictive declaration that is applicable on this particular site, it restricts development to just use group 6, so commercial retail only. And the Bay Street corridor obviously is something that promotes residential. So this site, while it's in the area of the Bay Street corridor rezoning, is limited by this use group 6 limitation as part of the restrictive deck.
That is correct.
So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay. And are there other areas, are there other sites in this area that also are restricted to use group 6, or is this just a total outlier here?
So as per my knowledge, and I can definitely get back to you on that, these are the only two lots in question that are subject to this restrictive declaration.
Okay. And canceling the restrictive declaration would eliminate the limitation to use group 6. Would it cancel anything else? Well, what else would be the consequence of canceling this restrictive declaration?
So this is the restrictive declaration. As I stated, it does have the required commitments, which have already been honored: the widening of Bay Street, the bus shelter. There are no plans to alter those in any way. And there's also the parking lot landscaping, which is from 1983. It does not comply with, I believe, the 2007 changes in vegetation requirements. So, you know, obviously any new development that would go on with the site, which this applicant is not proposing any new development, it's just a legal document action, would comply with any of the Bay Street corridor vegetation requirements.
Okay, got it. So all of the other restrictive declaration commitments, the parking lot landscaping plan, which is no longer, it's out of date to modern standards, bus shelter already there, Bay Street widening already widened. So this is the last remaining relevant substantive piece of the restrictive declaration.
That is correct, yes.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. So clear. There's no questions for you. So what we will do on this one is oh, I'm sorry. Is there?
Cirillo has his hand up. Sorry.
It was super clear, but there is also a question for you. Let me go to Commissioner Cirillo, although I will note that the microphones now look like they're all red, even though I think you can hear me. So Commissioner Cirillo, go right ahead.
I can hear you. I hope you can hear me. And thank you, Chairman, for your questions. It limits the questions I'm going to ask. But Vincent, I just want to be clear on one thing. The two lots that are part of the legal document action or the restrictive deck, are they the entirety of the site that we would know physically there, where sort of it's a strange designed existing sort of retail strip with the Western Beef at one end and then sort of the strip mall like building that runs along Bay and fronts Bay Street? Is that the entirety of the two lots, or is there any other portion of that property that sits as another lot that's not subject to this?
So those are as far as to my knowledge, those are the entirety of the two lots. I do know that these lots make up a much larger tax block, which runs all the way to the north. But these are, as far as I can tell, these are the only developments on these sites and the only lots in question. So
we could assume that the site that's being cleared now would be from the restricted declaration, and this action would enable that entire, we'll call it the parking lot location, because that sort of covers the entire base of that site or the two lots, that would then be freed up and fall sort of in compliance with the Bay Street corridor rezoning zoning.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I was going to ask about future development, but I think you just said at the close of your presentation, there is no current proposal to or application to redevelop this property, at least at this time. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's more of the administrative application of just canceling the restrictive deck.
Sure.
And they did not necessarily say what their exact plans were in terms of selling the property potentially, but there are no proposed developments that were listed in the application.
Understood. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, and with that, we're going to vote on this one to send an approval letter to the Department of Buildings. So I will seek assent by a voice vote to send said approval letter to the Buildings Department. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The microphones are off, but I heard unanimous ayes in the room. Yeah. All those opposed, nay. Okay, the ayes have it. And Ryan, if we can see if we can work on the microphones while we proceed to our next item. Yeah. Thank you, Vincent. Congrats.
We'll either get some handhelds, but we're aware of this issue. We're troubleshooting it.
Let's move to number 5.
The fifth item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning text amendment in Staten Island Community District 3, and our presenter is George Todorovich.
Hello, George. Welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon. All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So since it's been several weeks since the last presentation, here's a quick summary of the district to reframe our conversation. So the Special South Richmond Development District was created in 1975 in response to rapid growth, which occurred after the opening of the Verrazano Bridge 9 years prior. The goals of the special district aim to balance development with natural feature preservation. As you can see on the map, the special district includes dozens of neighborhoods and occupies 1/3 of the borough. A significant portion of properties in the district are classified as low-density land uses, such as 1- and 2-family residences, which total 41% of the lots in the district. And as a reminder, this initiative originally started because our Staten Island office has received feedback from the community over the past few decades, asking questions such as why the approval process is so complex and burdensome for small projects, or why individual homeowners need to spend extra time and money for CPC approvals that would simply be filed with DOB elsewhere in the borough, and also requesting that the city focus resources and review on the larger sites to help protect sensitive sites that have more natural features. These 3 goals were established by our working group members in response to the 3 main community questions on the previous slide. These goals strive to simplify the approval process by creating homeowner-friendly zoning rules for small properties, establish greater predictability for natural feature preservation and neighborhood character based on 50 years of best practices, and to improve regulations on larger sites by focusing CPC and community board review on the larger, more sensitive sites that have a greater impact on the public realm. So in summary, the proposal for South Richmond zoning relief intends to remove old zoning regulations with low or no applicability today, remove the certification for school seats and subdivisions on small sites. 3, allow as-of-right tree removal on small sites while updating rules to incentivize tree preservation of larger mature trees and retain minimum tree credit requirements across all sites. 4, clean up the DOS text maps to remove conflicts in the built environment while also improving the legibility of the maps. Acknowledge DEC areas of no land alteration on sites over 1 acre to strengthen the goals of the district. Fix inconsistencies with arterial streets, as well as modifying the regulatory structure for curb cuts and removing building setback regulations in historic town centers. 7, shift the existing authorization for group parking facilities to focus on larger sites over 1 acre, and also improve the findings of the authorization for neighborhood character and overall site design. And lastly, number 8, to shift CPC and community board review to larger sensitive sites equal to or greater than 1 acre in size. So as you can see in the top row, in terms of the proposed zoning structure, an as-of-right framework would be established for simple projects. Again, small zoning lot subdivisions under 1 acre in size would be filed directly at DOB and reviewed similar to DOB's processes for other zoning lot subdivisions elsewhere in New York City. The proposal would remove outdated zoning regulations, as indicated on the previous slide, which have 0 or lower applicability today. And lastly, site alterations on small sites, also under 1 acre, would be reviewed by DOB, similar to how DOB already enforces tree and topography regulations in South Richmond today. In the middle row, discretionary review would be required for most sites equal to or greater than 1 acre in size, and regulations related to designated open space, DOS, would remain unchanged and continue to be reviewed by DCP. However, the DOS text maps would be updated to improve legibility. And in the bottom row, a chair certification could be sought for plan review sites greater than 1 acre for the following conditions: any enlargement of an existing building that requires only 10 parking spaces or less, and any site alteration that may be beyond an as-of-right area, but is on a plan review site without any sensitive natural features. And regarding that last row on the previous slide, here are the thresholds to determine whether a plan review site has sensitive natural features and would be able to seek a certification versus requiring an authorization. Since any new development, any new construction on a plan review site would require an authorization, a chair certification could be sought for any enlargement, site alteration, or subdivision on a plan review site that does not have the following: a site that does not have any South Richmond District Plan elements, such as designated open space or frontage on an arterial street, a site that does not contain a DEC area of no land alteration, and a site that also does not exceed the rate of 2 tree credits per 1,000 square feet of lot area, which is in essence a forested site. All of these conditions would need to be met for the certification pathway. And regarding authorizations, so of the 9 existing CPC authorizations in the zoning text from 10761 to 10769, the proposal would create and or modify 5 of them. the existing authorization to modify yards, courts, and parking regulations would be made applicable to plan review sites or sites of any size that have DOS or a DEC area of no land alteration in order to allow for more natural feature preservation. A new authorization would be created for future subdivision of plan review sites that does not meet the certification criteria that was outlined on the previous slide. The existing authorizations for topography and natural features would be combined into one authorization for the modification of natural feature regulations. The existing authorization for uses in bulk in certain areas would be updated to simply remove the applicability for areas D, F, and K, yet the authorization would be retained for area SH. And the existing authorization for group parking facilities would be shifted from any site with more than 30 parking spaces to any site equal to or greater than 1 acre. And the findings for the authorization would also be improved to acknowledge pedestrian safety and overall site circulation. So we've just completed the referral process recently, and on May 24th, 2023, Staten Island Community Board 3 voted unanimously in favor of the text amendment with no conditions. And Borough President Vito Fasella on June 6th issued a favorable recommendation for the text amendment, also with no conditions. So I can now take any questions.
First of all, let me just say congratulations to you, George, and to the entire Staten Island team for all of the effort that went into putting together the proposal and then, you know, making sure that there was great engagement with the relevant stakeholders throughout this process. And clearly the response has been terrific. So congratulations. Let me go to Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you.
Hi, is it on? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. A number of years, thank you, George. It was a great presentation, both the written presentation and your presentation. A number of years ago, the department was involved in putting forth, and I believe it went to the community board, changes in regulations for the SNAD, both in the Bronx and in Staten Island. It got to the community boards, I think, and then kind of died a quick and painful death.
Yeah.
And is this the successor to that effort?
It is.
So will we see these recommendations also for the Bronx SNAD?
Not with this application.
Well, you won't do them, I understand.
Yeah. I know that, yeah, as you just recalled, the application was withdrawn in 2019. It was then modified to only include the Bronx, and then that was also withdrawn. You know, with our stakeholders in Staten Island, we've been kind of flirting with the idea of re-engaging or reopening the ideas regarding the special hillsides preservation district, which is in the North Shore, and then also SNAD, Special Natural Area District, which is in the Mid-Island. And that Mid-Island portion is the exact same zoning section as the Bronx, which is why, you know, we share that brotherhood or sisterhood with the Bronx. But we haven't had the resources or political viability or time to re-engage with those conversations yet. So
the SNAD will stay the same for Central?
Yes.
Staten Island and for the North Shore?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, George. With that, we will pick this one up at a public hearing on Wednesday.
Fred had his
Oh, I'm sorry, Fred. You know, Fred, I'm sorry, but
Commissioner Cirillo.
when I can't see you, it's not that you're out of mind. It's just that you're out of sight. So let me get to Commissioner Cirillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I wanted to do was really, you, as usual, you sort of established the point of view. I just wanted to acknowledge the work of the department in the Staten Island office, particularly. Commissioner Benjamin's question sort of outlined the history here, which started out really quite controversially and in dealing with these issues. And I think where we've come over time, and that's to the credit of the department and the staff working so closely with the community, particularly in this case, the South Shore area, the private sector, homeowners, the elected officials, the community board, really has all resulted in really a terrific place to have landed. And I think it's been a great example of how when people all come to the table and work out their issues, you can find success. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, George. Thank you. And the team, I know this is going on a long time, and there are members of the team who are no longer with the office, but all of the work together has gotten us to this point. So appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll also note that I also want to give thanks to our city planning and civic engagement team, who also helped us with the consensus building and re-engagement also.
Great. Thank you, George. Thank you, and we will pick this one up for the public hearing Wednesday.
All right, see you Wednesday.
So, thank you. We'll see you there. Ryan, let's move on to number 6.
The 6th item on our agenda is a referral of a non-ULURP modification to a previously approved special permit in Community District 1 in Manhattan, and our presenter is Jasmine Topale.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Jasmine.
This is a private application by 60 Wall LP for a non-ULURP modification of previously approved special permits and a modification to the restrictive declaration. The original approvals from 1985 supported the development of 60 Wall Street, which is a postmodern style commercial office building constructed in the late 1980s as the former Dutch bank building designed by Roche Dinkeloo. For non-ULURP modifications, the Commission needs to find that there are no new zoning actions, no new waivers, and other modifications outside of the proposed modifications being sought today, and that the findings made for the previously granted special permits remain valid. I might have turned it off.
No, just so there we go.
Okay,
I don't know.
Sorry about that. 60 Wall Street is located in Manhattan Community District 1 in the Financial District neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. The proposed modifications to the special permits would modify the interior covered pedestrian space, which is a POPS or privately owned public space, and modify the exterior of the 3rd and 4th floor of the building. I'll go into more details of the changes in a moment. Here's a map showing the surrounding area of 60 Wall Street, with the 60 Wall Street building highlighted in yellow. The neighborhood is home to many office, commercial buildings, and its status as a central business district. To many others, it's also home to a well-established residential community that is experiencing rapid growth. The building is located in the special Lower Manhattan district. Its boundaries include Pine Street to the north, Pearl Street to the east, Wall Street to the south, and William Street to the west. The lot is mapped on a C55 district. So as I mentioned earlier, the proposed project involves the non-ULURP modification of special permits along with the modification of the restrictive declaration. For the first, the non-ULURP modification of the special permit pursuant to 7487 will support the modification of the interior covered pedestrian space. For the second, the non-ULURP modification of the special permit pursuant to 7479 will support the modification of the exterior 3rd and 4th floors. And lastly, the modification to the restrictive declaration. Next, I'll talk through both the non-ULURP modifications to show what is being proposed. So first, we'll start off with the interior covered pedestrian space. The CPC originally granted the special permit because it met the findings outlined in section 7487. The findings include that the CPS will provide comfort and convenience for the general public. The space is located at or close to pedestrian circulation areas. The space should be obvious from the outside of the building. There is appropriate commercial uses fronting the CPS, like small stores or cafes, and the surrounding area has access to light and air. And lastly, that the subway connection is necessary to ease pedestrian movement and sidewalk congestion. The CPC must find that these findings made for the previously granted special permit for the covered pedestrian space remain valid. So here's an image of the existing covered pedestrian space, which is on the ground floor of 60 Wall Street. The existing amenities include a number of movable tables and chairs, benches, water features, which include fountains, trees, and other greeneries, retail fronting the covered pedestrian space, and a subway connection to the 2-3 train. The next slide will show updates to the design. So the applicant proposes a design that they believe references the existing design while also updating the CPS. This rendering is in a similar orientation as the previous slide. In the redesign, the applicant is proposing to increase the number of movable chairs from the original 104 to 192 and increase the number of tables. It will include 3,600 square feet of planting area within the CPS. There will also be a new staircase, ADA accessible elevator, and escalator leading to the Wall Street G3 subway below the CPS. Other amenities include a new public restroom, which will be accessible to persons with disabilities adjacent to the CPS, a new water feature, and a new retail space fronting on the CPS. Here's another angle of the covered pedestrian space showing the landing to the stairs and the escalator to the below-ground subway, and also the elevator that will go to the mezzanine level that's closer to the right. This orientation is looking towards Wall Street. Here's another view of the CPS looking towards Pine Street with a view of the retail space to the left and the seating around the subway connection. Here's a view that looks leading from the subway to the stairs and escalators up onto the covered pedestrian space. The applicant has been working with the MTA to coordinate the changes related to the subway entrances and exits, including the new staircases, the escalators, and the elevator. The MTA accepted the concepts for these elements on April 26, 2023. So next we'll talk about the exterior changes. The 7479 special permit allowed the transfer of development rights from a landmark building to an adjacent lot. The language in the zoning text states that the City Planning Commission shall give due consideration to the relationship between the landmark building and any new buildings developed on the adjacent lot regarding materials, design, scale, and location of bulk. This consideration was for the purpose of providing a harmonious architectural relationship between the buildings. The original transfer of development rights was from 55 Wall Street, which is the building on the right, to 60 Wall Street, which is the building to the left. At the time, it wasn't required as part of the application, but the Landmarks Preservation Commission did issue a letter outlining that the proposed 1980s design had a harmonious architectural relationship with the landmark 55 Wall Street, which the City Planning Commission took into consideration. The Department of City Planning asked the applicant for a similar letter for their proposed design, and on January 31st, the Landmark Preservation Commission voted to approve the harmonious architectural relationship of the proposed design at 60 Wall Street with 55 Wall Street. A copy of that letter is included in your briefing packages. The changes to the exterior are limited to the third and fourth floor. The applicant is seeking to make changes to the window treatment, including adding a new large format glass and replacing the dark tinted windows, and also the creation of larger window openings on the fourth floor to allow for more light and air to the below CPS. So here's a view from Hanover Street showing the existing third and fourth floor outlined in the yellow box. And then here's a view with the proposed redesign showing the changes outlined in the same yellow box. So to sum up, this is a non-ULURP modification of two previously approved special permits to support the redesign of the covered pedestrian space and the exterior of the third and fourth floor. The Landmarks Preservation Commission approved the harmonious architectural relationship of the proposed 60 Wall Street design with 55 Wall Street on January 31st, 2023, and issued a letter, which is in your briefing packages. The MTA approved the concepts for the subway entrances and exits on April 26, 2023. This project will be referred out to Manhattan Community Board 1. This project is on their Land Use Committee agenda on July 10th. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to start with Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Yasmin. Well, preliminarily, the proposed design would seem to be an improvement over what's there. But in my few months on the commission, I have yet to see I have yet to see any of these pops that were other than sparsely populated. So it brings me to the question, and you didn't cover it, not that you should have, but I'm just wondering about the signage and how many people who walk past this place actually know that it's a Pops and that they can walk in and have a sandwich or whatever.
Right. There is going to be signage posted outside both the Pine Street and the Wall Street entrances, and it will be our regulated POP signage that we require for every POPs that gets approved.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the adequacy of it. Is it possible that we could see what's there and the degree to which it really pops out, quote unquote, to passersby, letting them know that it's a Pops?
Sure. As part of the application, in your briefing packages, you do have a copy of the drawings, which does show the POP signage. I can also ask the applicant team to see if they can provide a rendering of that as well.
All right, I'll recheck that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Goodrich.
It might be on.
Oh, okay. Well, just so I have it right, so the proposed design is to bring in more people in the space or be able to hold more people? Or?
That is one of their intent. The other intent is to provide a space that's more in line with our current POPs regulations and also to bring more light and air into the space. That's why they're trying to provide like changes to the third and fourth floor, changes to that glass treatment, and to the window openings.
Okay. I'm the only one. I love this space. I don't know what's wrong with it. Does it look 1980s? I mean, I think
I think you'll find you're not the only one. We've heard that others do like it.
Oh, the subway entrance. Okay, I was trying to figure out what the purpose behind which.
The living wall. The subway entrance is there today, right?
There is a subway.
Yeah. Is the question like what references the old space, or what
I
is
was sort of wondering like what like is is there in a nutshell, if there's something wrong with the old space other than the actual aesthetic, that would lessen, does it like lessen traffic? Is it doesn't, because I've heard harmonious relationship, but then I also heard that the old space was fine with harmonious architecture. So then I began to wonder if there's something actually wrong with it, because I kind of like it. So it's one of my favorite spaces.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your perspective on this. And I think, as Ryan said, that I think you will find people who have a range of views on the aesthetics of the space. I will just note though that in our work on privately owned public space applications, and we deal with are dealing with dozens of them at any given time, we do try to stay out of the specifics of design and to leave that to the applicant team and the designers that they hire. And we in the department lay out the specific requirements for the spaces. What is the space supposed to achieve for the public? Ample seating, light and air, amenities, things like that. And so I think it's important to for the department that we try to keep an arm's length from specifics on design and to allow the designers to do their work. In the case of this particular application, I will just kind of come back to the nature of the application that's before the commission, which is a non-ULURP modification, and really just for the commission to determine if the findings of the original special permit that was granted in 1985, I believe, are still met, and to basically find that no new waivers are being sought, or the previously granted waivers are not being expanded in scope in any way. So, that's not to lessen your comment on the design, but the design itself is not what's specifically before us right now.
Yeah, I think my question was more so absent obviously I kind of like the design, but absent the design, if the proposed design was to somehow rectify something that was wrong with the existing design, or if it's all fine, and the main new proposed design is just about the design. I think that's, just to be clear, that's what I'm essentially asking.
Right, yeah.
If there's something other than the design that's wrong, and I think Commissioner Benjamin was pointing out that there's a subway, harmonious architecture with the subway. So I get that point.
Right. I will note that the building, the entire skyscraper is vacant right now, as the owner is renovating it, repositioning it, and intends to re-tenant it. And so this is part of the overall rehabilitation of the building and trying to find a new tenant for it, a new life for the building. And so presenting a newly designed front door, if you will, is, I think, an important aspect of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of looks like something that would be landmark.
Okay, I've got Commissioner Benjamin and Commissioner Osorio.
Right.
Just one quick question. Is the Goldman uptown, this was the Goldman building, wasn't it?
This was Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche.
And it was Goldman before that, wasn't it?
I don't recall. Yeah. I mean, we can certainly find out for you.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Osorio.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question in terms of the conditions that have to do with public lighting or lighting in general. I'm wondering, and of course, the specific consideration there is whether it's maximizing public natural lighting and so forth to the inside. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, how does the new sort of window treatment contribute to the lighting of the sidewalk, of the outside of the building? In other words, kind of like building on Vice Chair Knuckles' question in terms of how inviting this could be. From your point of view, does the new window treatment sort of like show a little bit more of what's happening inside and kind of like invite the people, the public to come in or not? It sounds like it could, but I'm wondering what is your position on this? And then the other thing is, I'm wondering if you can also explain to us to what extent is it fair to interpret that as a condition, there should be a contribution to, how much light, because this is a very dark street. I mean, the pictures that you showed us kind of like show how dark that ground floor is, and so I'm wondering, can we expect some type of contribution from this change in that regard? Thanks.
Yeah, for the window treatment and how it interacts with a pedestrian's experience from the outside, this was something that they were trying to achieve when they were trying to update the base of the building. So they are going to update the windows right here at the rear side with an effort to make it more inviting, more visible from the outside. One of the original CPC findings was that this CPS could be visible from the outside. So I think maybe going back to Commissioner Goodridge's comment too, this is something that this design achieves more than the original design, that it's going to be more visible from the sidewalk spaces because now you can see more into the space. But also the third and the fourth floor is another, it's not as easy to view because you have to look up, but it is another space where because they're changing out the glass there, it's going to be more visible to people looking in. I think to your comment about the lighting itself and that how currently, it's on a side street that's doesn't get much light to come in to begin with. They did take that into consideration also, which is why they're providing ample lighting inside the interior space. So aside from natural lighting that's already going to come in through the windows during certain times of the day, there is a lighting plan in the packages, in the drawing, so you can take a look there as well.
Thank you. And if I may, I had another question, which is a more general question, I guess, for the department, but building also on Vice Chair Knuckles' question. Is there a possibility to discuss more broadly the requirements, the signage requirements for pubs in general? This is a concern that I've heard many times, and I'm wondering if how is the department thinking about that? Are we advertising them enough? Does the public really know what opportunities are there to rethink or brainstorm around that?
I mean, my view on this is that we should always be thinking about ways to make sure that people see and understand these spaces as publicly accessible. I think there's frequently some uncertainty among members of the public as to what is and what is not. I remember myself being chased out of a Pops while I was campaigning for public office, gathering signatures next to a sign which said, accessible to the public, and had the police called on me. So I certainly understand that concern, and I think it's a good one. And so, I don't know if you all want to say anything about, about thoughts that are either underway or thoughts that have been considered, but I am certainly open to this point because I think that it's a hard thing to do. I mean, signage is what signage is, and it has limitations. I think a lot of it has to do with the design and the feeling that you actually can access the space rather than the sign itself. But I don't know if, Eric, you want to jump in here and add anything?
Sure.
Or Jasmine, sorry.
The signage is, I think, as you know, really one of the most critically important things to indicate that these spaces on private property are open to the public. The zoning lays out very specific requirements for POPs signs, that include, minimum dimensions, the minimum size of type, indicating that POPs are open 24 hours. Going beyond that, though, a couple of things. We adopted a new POPs logo that applies to all POPs citywide. And in conjunction with that, the City Council passed legislation, this was just before COVID, passed legislation that retroactively applied signage, our POPs signage requirements to all POPs citywide. Previously, some POPs in the city were actually not required to have signs indicating that they were open to the public, and it was something that was very difficult for us to retroactively apply new regulations to existing spaces. City Council legislation allowed us to do that, and pursuant to local law, we adopted new rules that now require POPs signs to be located on all POPs citywide, regardless of whether they were originally required to provide them. And currently, all POPs citywide should have those signs in place. Now, not all POPs have actually installed them yet, and we're continuing to work with property owners to ensure that they're aware of that requirement and that they're fulfilling it. When they do, when they are made aware, they come to us to review signage packages, and that's where we ensure that signs are located at appropriate places on each street frontage that the POPs occupy, so that people are really almost guaranteed to encounter a POPs sign indicating that it's a public space when you come upon the space from the sidewalk. And so that's not to say that we can't improve that. We're always looking for opportunities to improve, our POPs text. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we have, changes coming to the commission, at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Knuckles.
So Eric, on that point, what's depicted here on page 63, is that the current?
Yes, that's consistent with the current regulations. Yes. And again, those signs are required to be located at each street frontage that the POPs fronts on.
Okay, so this one will be referred to the community board for 45 days. So we'll look forward to hearing their recommendation. But thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Eric, for this. And Ryan, let's move on to number 7.
Yes, the 7th item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a letter of intent to acquire office space in Manhattan Community District 1. Presenting to the commission for the first time is Audrey Wachs.
All right, welcome.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services and the Independent Budget Office for office space acquisition at 80 Pine Street in Manhattan Community Board 1. The application is to facilitate the relocation from IBO's current office space at 110 William Street. IBO is responsible for providing local elected officials with objective information and analysis regarding the budget, fiscal implications of proposed law and policy, as well as information regarding projected revenues. 80 Pine Street is in a C55 commercial district. C55 districts are central commercial districts intended for office and retail use. It is also within the special Lower Manhattan district, a district designed to enhance the vibrancy of Lower Manhattan through commercial and residential uses in the borough's oldest central business district. The area surrounding 80 Pine has a mix of high-rise office buildings, high-rise residential and commercial buildings, as well as multifamily buildings. IBO has outgrown its current space. It needs an office that can accommodate additional staff as well as interns and research fellows. It also needs conference rooms and technology upgrades that will facilitate its work and mission. The proposed office space will be accessible to all visitors and staff via elevator and stairs from the main lobby. And the downtown location of this property ensures that IBO will continue to be in close proximity to the New York City Council and the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget. The site is well served by public transit with numerous subways and express bus lines within a 6-minute walk. Main pedestrian access to the building is on Pearl Street with additional lobby access on Pine Street and Maiden Lane. Vehicle and bicycle access to the underground parking garage is located on the Water Street side of the building. And at the site, there is no parking allocated to IBO staff. IBO proposes to lease approximately 10,200 square feet of office space on part of the 29th floor at 80 Pine Street, a 38-story, 1.1 million square foot office building constructed in 1961. The office space includes a mix of open offices, standard offices, conference rooms, as well as amenities like a pantry and restroom. The building has several indoor common areas that are accessible to all tenants, including the lobby, the 22nd floor, and as well as an outdoor terrace on the 23rd floor. To conclude, the proposed acquisition of office space would allow IBO to effectively continue its duties. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Vice Chair Knuckles?
Thank you for the presentation. Should we presume that there was no expansion or additional space in 110 William, or was this a decision to go to another building because of dissatisfaction? I know 110 William has had a lot of city agencies in it, so I'm just wondering what prompted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
They're coming. They're coming soon.
They're going.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going.
Yeah.
So, was this motivated by a desire to just have a different landlord, or what?
IBO says that the current space can't meet their technology needs, specifically for for virtual meetings with outside parties, and so they were specifically looking for a new office space that could have these multiple conference rooms. But the applicant and DCAS will be here on Wednesday to answer additional questions.
Okay, thank you.
No? Okay, thank you very much. We will pick this one up on Wednesday for that public hearing. Congratulations. Thank you. All right, Ryan, what's number 8?
The 8th item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a special permit in Manhattan Community District 5, and our presenter is Connor Clark.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon, Connor.
This is a private application by 5 Points 262 Project LLC, which seeks a parking special permit pursuant to Section 13451 of the zoning resolution to build a residential accessory automated parking garage with a total capacity of 23 spaces as part of a residential development in Manhattan Community District 5 on West 29th Street between 5th Avenue and Broadway. This application has come back to review session after review by Community Board 5 and the Manhattan Borough President. The development site outlined here in red is located on the northeast corner of 5th Avenue and West 29th Street. The garage will be located on the ground floor, cellar, and subcellar levels of a 26-unit, 56-story residential building that is currently under construction. Under the Manhattan Core regulations, the building would be allowed 5 spaces as of right. These photos taken during the spring show recent progress on the building. The photo on the right shows Marble Collegiate Church, located across West 29th Street from the development site. This drawing shows the ground floor level plan of the proposed garage on West 29th Street with the garage entrance outlined in red and the building lobby located to the east below the garage entrance on the drawing. 15 parking spaces be located in the cellar, 4 in subcellar 1 and 4 in subcellar 2. The findings for Section 13451 indicate that the CPC may approve a parking facility that exceeds the 20% maximum limit for Community District 5 if the number of off-street parking spaces in such proposed facility is reasonable and not excessive in relation to recent trends in close proximity to the proposed facility with regard to dwelling units and parking spaces. The special permit also has findings in Section 13445 related to congestion, the efficient functioning of streets, conflicts between different modes of transportation, and the character of the streetscape. The applicant completed a residential growth parking study. The study compared all changes in residential off-street parking to all changes in residential dwelling units within a 10-year look-back period from 2012 to 2024, extended 2 years to the anticipated completion year of the project. Sites were considered if they were located within a radius of 1/3 of a mile of the development site. The applicant found an error in their initial study and updated the numbers and found that during the look-back period, there was a net decrease of 26 parking spaces, including the project, and an increase of 2,762 dwelling units. This gives the proposed project a residential growth parking ratio of negative 0.9%. The erroneous parking ratio had been negative 2.4%. In Community District 5, the maximum permitted growth of off-street parking spaces to dwelling units in a 10-year look-back period is 20%. The applicant refiled the application this past Friday to fix the error. The applicant seeks a special permit pursuant to Section 13451 to allow for 23 parking spaces in a garage accessory to a building with 26 residential dwelling units. This would be an increase of 18 spaces over the 5 as-of-right spaces allowed in this area of Manhattan Core. Community Board 5 met on May 11th and voted to recommend denial of the application with 27 votes in favor, 1 opposed, and 2 abstaining. In their letter to Chair Garodnick, the board stated that the development is located in a transit-rich district. 83% of residents do not have access to a vehicle, and the building would have too few apartments, none of which would be affordable to address the housing needs of the district. Manhattan Borough President Levine recommended disapproval of the application. He agreed with CB5's first 2 reasons and added that research shows that parking incentivizes car ownership, which would go against the city's carbon reduction efforts, and that only 3% of residents in the area used a vehicle to get to work. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We'll pick this up on Wednesday with the applicant, so we don't need to do too much here. But just one question about that research point that the borough president cited about parking incentivizing car ownership. Is that true across all income levels, or are there any differences between, the most and the least affluent as to how much the availability of parking influences their decision to own a car?
That's a good question. I did briefly look at the study. I don't know I know there were a lot of variables considered. There was income levels considered. There was, questions about where residents were moving from. So I don't know exactly, but I can get back to you.
Yeah, that's fine. It looks like the sort of building where the people who live there likely are going to have cars. And so it does at least raise the question as to where those cars are going. So, okay. All right. Let me see if there are other questions. Obviously, we have Wednesday ahead of us. Okay. So we'll pick it up there. Thank you, Connor. Thank you. We'll see this one on Wednesday for the public hearing. Ryan, let's go to 9.
The 9th item on our agenda is a preview and review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment and special permit in the Bronx Community District 3. Our presenter is Tun Dueling.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Ryan. All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The project is 893 Eagle Avenue rezoning and is on the agenda for pre-hearing. The application was certified on February 13th of this year. Here's an illustration of the proposed development at 893 Eagle Avenue, looking in a northerly direction. The site is located in the Morrisanian neighborhood of Community Board 3 in the Bronx. The applicant intends to build a new 11-story plus cellar and subcellar community facility building with 83 affordable and supportive housing units, counseling offices, and multi-purpose rooms to serve the building residents. The proposed development is a philanthropic or nonprofit institution with sleeping accommodations as listed in Use Group 3. The proposed development includes 83 units. 50 units are supportive housing units for individuals living with HIV/AIDS, and the remaining 33 units are affordable housing units. Counseling offices to provide residents with on-site supportive services and multi-purpose rooms are located at the cellar and subcellar level. No parking is proposed as part of this development, and a publicly accessible stairway connecting East 161st Street and Eagle Avenue, and therefore bridging the significant elevation difference between these two streets, is part of the proposed development. The publicly accessible stairway is to be maintained in accordance with the restrictive declaration, and the building base height would rise to 60 feet or 6 stories, with an overall height of approximately 132 feet. The applicant, OGAR, seeks a zoning map amendment to rezone from the existing R6 to an R7-2 zoning district, a special permit to allow the community facility floor area ratio to apply to philanthropic or nonprofit institutions with sleeping accommodations, and a zoning text amendment to amend Appendix F of the zoning resolution to establish an MIH area coterminous with the rezoning area. Community Board 3 submitted a favorable recommendation without conditions on April 26th, and Bronx Borough President Gibson submitted a favorable recommendation also without conditions on May 24th. And thank you for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Just that grade change from bottom to top, how high is that from the bottom of that staircase to the next street level up above?
I believe it's about 33 feet, the elevation difference.
Bronx is full of those.
Yeah. Okay, let me see if there are other questions. Commissioner Benjamin and Commissioner Osorio.
Since we've seen two of them today, I was wondering, in the residential developments, by and large, there's a local preference in the lottery system, but with these units that are not-for-profit, philanthropic, with sleeping accommodation, is there also a local preference, or is it, how are the tenant selections done for these programs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe it's Bronx residents. I don't know how local that preference is for residents, but I can ask the applicant, and then we'll get back to you on Wednesday at the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Osorio.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering if also on Wednesday we can see a little more information or some evidence in terms of how the building will comply with Local Law 97, or how is this really accomplished in passive design? 1, 2, the sustainability measures proposed for the roofs. The renderings are very shy on that, but it sounds like there is an intent on that. And then just finally, in terms of the staircases on the right, like what's the maintenance plan for that, and what type of lighting design is being considered for this? Are these going to be solar lamps? Like, let's understand a little bit what's the plan there.
Yeah, I'll relay those questions to the applicant team.
Thank you.
Okay, great, terrific. Thank you, Tin. Let's move on to our next item. This one will be for a public hearing on Wednesday, and item 10.
Yes, this is a review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Brooklyn Community District 12, and our presenter is Emily Bachman.
Hello, Emily.
Good afternoon. Okay. This is a pre-hearing review for a private application from 1233 57th Street, LLC, for a zoning map amendment from an R5 district to an R6A district, and a zoning text amendment to map Appendix F to map mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH, in the Borough Park neighborhood of Brooklyn. The application was certified on February 27th, and the public hearing is scheduled for Wednesday, June 28th, this Wednesday.
At the time of certification, the applicant proposed a 79,330 square foot residential building with 8 stories, or 83 feet in height, containing 60 dwelling units, 18 of which would be income restricted under MIH, and 94 parking spaces. To facilitate the development, the applicant is proposing a zoning map amendment to change the existing R5 district to an R6A zoning district. And the applicant is also proposing a zoning text amendment to map MIH options 1 and 2 coterminous with the project area. Following certification, the applicant revised the illustrative plans for the proposed development in response to neighborhood opposition to the project as certified. The community board and borough president recommendations are in response to these revised plans, which maintain the actions requested, mapping R6A and MIH, maintain the maximum FAR of the proposed R6A district by including duplex residential units in a portion of the previously proposed parking, and increasing unit size. And the result is a shorter building, 5 stories or 55 feet instead of originally proposed 8 stories, 83 feet. It's also a reduction in the number of units, 14 fewer units overall, 3 fewer MIH units, and larger units. The majority are still 3-bedroom, but 4 and 5-bedroom units were added to the proposal. On April 25th, 2023, Brooklyn Community Board 12 voted 36 in favor, 1 in opposition with no abstentions to disapprove. And on May 31st, 2023, the borough president submitted a recommendation to approve with the following conditions. First, that the applicant enter into a binding agreement with the community, providing assurance that the revised proposal will be built at 5 stories with 46 units, reflecting the revised bedroom mix. Second, that they identify an experienced MIH administrator to ensure the affordable housing units will be marketed equitably. And third, that the applicant meet with HPD to discuss the feasibility of developing a 100% affordable housing project at this site. Additionally, the borough president encourages DCP to work with Community Board 12 to develop a neighborhood plan. And I will be happy to take questions.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just start to clarify here. So we started, it started in R5, proposal was R6A. It was a voluntary cut of the project at the community board level to 5 stories, 46 units down from 60, 52 parking spaces down from 94, and larger unit sizes, correct?
Yes.
And that's where it currently stands officially here.
Yes.
So we have a community board disapproval, borough president approval, and now public hearing.
Correct.
So far, so good?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
So the question is the purpose of the R6A, since they're not going to be taking advantage of the full density of it, to make mandatory inclusionary housing a requirement?
They are still proposing to take full advantage of the available FAR from R6A. They're just achieving it in a different way.
So they're still building 79,300 square feet, it's just...
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah.
Got it. And how binding is the binding agreement? Because I think it's been the policy of the commission in the past that we did not, once we approve a zoning change, it's as of right. So how binding is that?
I think that the applicant can speak further to the ongoing negotiations. I know it's a continued conversation, and I think that that's beyond.
Yeah, it would not be the commission that would be a party to any agreement.
Right. With the zoning and answer, and the direct answer to the question is the zoning is the zoning.
Yeah, yeah.
So the zoning answers the questions. Whatever else anybody does is outside of the scope of anything we can do here. Zoning is the final answer, at least for the purposes of what is legally required.
Appropriate zoning is its own reward.
Because I would have no issue with 55 feet. I would have an issue with the 80 feet, and so that would be a problem if it's. And I don't believe we should be forcing landowners to go into binding agreements outside of the zoning outside of what the zoning is. And the next question is, how likely is this project to be built? Is it 421A certified? Is it 421A ready? Is it been approved? Do they have shovels in the ground? Do they have a footing in the ground?
Before coming to DCP, the applicant did vest under 421A for an as-of-right R5 building.
They can amend presumably they would be able to amend their plans.
That's my understanding.
I believe so, yes.
And still qualify.
Yes, although there is also a time limit on when they have to complete, right?
Right.
And
2026,
so
I think it is.
that is also,
There's enough time for that, I believe.
yes.
Okay. Wednesday it is.
Okay. Commissioner Soria.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. In the EAS, the document states an insignificant, but yet important reduction in open space per capita, and that's, of course, with the previous sort of like number of units, but I'm wondering if this addresses that. Do you know? Have you looked into that?
I was going to say that my assumption for the environmental review is that they studied a worst case, which was beyond even what the previous, which was more dense than what the previous iteration is, and much more dense than what this iteration is. Is that correct, Emily?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But the finding was that there was a reduction.
There's a reduction under a much more dense building.
So I'm wondering if the current, actually addresses that, or no?
It would, if they were to reduce the density, then there would be a reduction in the, there would be less of a reduction.
But how much of a reduction is it? Are we still? And I know that this was determined not to be significant, but I'm just wondering if where we are, because this is I think this is an important precedent for the type of development that this area could have. So I'm just wondering if this is the right density, is what I'm trying to understand.
I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that because the EAS identified an insignificant impact in terms of open space, the open space related proposals within this project are beyond the required street trees. They're illustrative and they would be private. So private rooftop, private backyards, none of that is going to impact an environmental review on publicly accessible open space, but it does reflect what the community is asking for in terms of the built form and amenities.
Thank you. This is useful, I guess, and I guess it's a really good bridge to my next question, which is so I'm just wondering if I know that the borough president recommended kind of like a neighborhood-wide study in partnership with the community board, and I'm wondering if there's been a response in that regard yet. I mean, it's a recommendation for the department, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Alex.
Sure. No, we're always happy to meet with the community board on this. We will note that in their previous district needs statements, they have identified affordable housing and other issues that they've repeated. And I will reiterate here publicly and to the community board that we'd be more than happy to meet with them and talk about a future look at the neighborhood and what they need and what their goals are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And one last question: is it possible on when we see this again on Wednesday, to have a response from HPD in terms of the other recommendation? I mean, is this something that, I guess the recommendation is for the applicant to explore that, but I'm wondering if this is something that we could facilitate or at least to understand whether that's feasible, or maybe can the applicant be prepared to talk about that?
I think the applicant will be prepared to talk about that on Wednesday, and we can also reach out to HPD and see what options exist.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, with that, we'll bring it to a public hearing on Wednesday. Thank you, Emily. And Ryan, let's move on to our 11th item of the day.
I do want to, Commissioner Marin had his hand up, I believe, for the past item, and we missed it. So I don't know if he wants to ask his question.
Don't go anywhere, Emily. Let's see.
No, this was for Thun. Sorry.
Oh. Okay.
But if Commissioner Marin wants to ask
Okay.
this question, we can.
Sorry, Commissioner.
Sure, no, it's quite all right. I understand that there's a disconnect sometimes. The
But
only question
Kun's
that I
here
had
and
was,
he's back, so, you know, you didn't miss a thing. If you want to pose the question directly to him, he is standing at the podium ready.
sure. So my question is the same that I had posed earlier on, and I realize that maybe the answer, you don't know the answer, it hasn't been provided yet, but there used to be an old rail cut here that prevented past developers from building because they couldn't find the owners of the rail cut. So that you are all aware, the Bronx is riddled with these little private rail cuts that for some reason or other were never acquired either by the city or by private developers when the streets were built. I know this is the third incident that I've encountered on the development scenario where there is a rail cut, and I'm just curious as to whether the title company has picked up on it or if it's been, you know, ameliorated by some sort of legal codicil. I'm just interested in knowing a little bit further about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I remember that from review session at certification and from February that came up as well. We have shared that question with the applicant, but I've also looked into that at the time back in February. And that railroad spur is located a little further west to 3rd Avenue and does not impact the site. But again, it's been 4 months ago. I'll just check my notes on that again prior to Wednesday.
No, thank you. You're probably right. I know that it was in that community. I know that it was in that neighborhood, and it was preventing some development. So if it hasn't shown up here, then I'm confident that you're right, that it's west of this. And you're absolutely right, because 3rd Avenue is but 300 feet down.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Toon. All right, let's move on to 11, the 589 Fulton Street curb cut authorization.
Yeah, Amrita is here to discuss this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Waiting for the presentation to be pulled up. This is a private application seeking a zoning authorization to permit a curb cut in connection with an as-of-right approximately 606,000 square foot predominantly residential development located in downtown Brooklyn, Community District 2. The as-of-right development would include approximately 591 dwelling units, of which 178 units would be affordable under the Voluntary Inclusion Act program. The development would also contain 24,000 square feet of ground floor retail space. As the Commission may recall, the applicant proposes to construct a 38-foot wide curb cut along DeKalb Avenue, providing access to 2 new off-street loading berths. The applicant notes that they are pursuing this application for the proposed curb cut to allow for loading activities for residential moves, waste collection, and retail deliveries to be located within enclosed berths on the development site. Further, the applicant notes that the curb cut could not be located on Fulton Street, which is blocked to through traffic and open only to MTA buses, nor on Flatbush Avenue Extension, which is a 6-lane, 2-way major thoroughfare. DeKalb Avenue is a one-way side street that has less traffic than the other frontages on the development site, and the applicant therefore believes that DeKalb Avenue is the best location for the curb cut, allowing for on-site rather than curbside loading activities. The applicant has provided responses to questions and comments from the CPC at post-referral review session held on June 5th, which I'll now walk through. Concerns were expressed regarding the proposed truck movement and its effect on existing traffic and pedestrian activity patterns. The need to account for on-street parking conditions, including the presence of double parking or illegal parking, was brought up. The CPC recommended exploring strategies such as limitations on the number of deliveries and off hours where loading activities may be restricted, as well as employing traffic enforcement agents. In response to these comments on traffic management, the applicant notes that they are implementing measures to ensure that the operation of the loading berth on a daily basis will minimize any potential disruptions on DeKalb Avenue. Access to the loading berth will be managed by building staff, and a safety light meeting code requirements will be provided to notify pedestrians when trucks are entering and exiting the loading berth. The applicant plans on scheduling the majority of usage of the loading berths outside of rush hour. The applicant intends to engage a private waste collection firm for on-site trash pickup within the loading berths, and will work with the firm to schedule collection for early morning, evening, or overnight hours. Residential moves will be scheduled to occur during daytime hours outside of rush hour, approximately 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and no more than 2 moves will be scheduled to occur during any given window of time. Further, the applicant notes that the proposed curb cut and associated loading berths are meant to take trucks off of the street, to clear the sidewalk for use by pedestrians, and to minimize any potential disruption to traffic flow that would result from trucks parking curbside. Correspondingly, a cap on the usage of the loading berths would result in deliveries, waste collection, and residential move-ins taking place at the curb, which would take up space on the sidewalk and impact pedestrian flow. The curb cut and the off-street loading berths would help avoid double parking by larger trucks and free up parking spaces that would reduce double parking by vehicles in the area. A question was posed regarding whether impacts on the neighboring subway station were analyzed, given additional residents anticipated as part of the development. The applicant notes that this project is an as-of-right development, which did not require analysis of mass transit usage. In seeker terms, the usage would be the same with action and no action scenarios. And lastly, the CPC asked for clarification with regards to potential conflicts with the B38 bus, which runs on DeKalb Avenue, in particular as it turns towards Bond Street. The applicant notes that the portion of DeKalb Avenue adjacent to Bond Street that the B38 bus uses for pickup and drop-off would not be impacted by the proposed curb cut. Further, locating the trucks within the development site would prevent them from being located on the curb, ensuring that buses could pass by unimpeded and the bike lane would remain unobstructed. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me see if there are questions on this one. Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for getting those answers. Some of them were questions that I had. The applicant's response that they would have some type of signage for management of pedestrians walking by. Are they going to do anything to alert cars? I mean, when a truck is going to back up, it would be nice if the cars knew that so that they were not parked in such a way that the truck can't back up. I mean, as you know, it is a very narrow, very congested location for cars, and it's a very short link in terms of traffic. So from where the curb cut is to the intersection with Flatbush, if there are more than 3 or 4 cars there, no truck will be able to back up. So if the applicant can respond to how they're going to deal with cars, I know that they can't themselves assign a TEA, that only the city can, but I think there has to be something that is going to handle the traffic congestion, not just pedestrian safety.
Right. The applicant has mentioned that they have building management staff who will be present curbside, managing those movements and also alerting cars and other vehicles. They also have safety lights proposed, which will be kind of on and kind of indicating when trucks are anticipated to move in and out of the dock. So those measures are expected to be ways in which the applicant expects to handle vehicular conflicts as well. But we can certainly pass along the feedback to the applicant.
Yeah, I just think it's, and you've identified that also, there was no great solution to this problem. It's just inelegant and difficult, and trying to make it function as well as it can is a concern.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right. Thank you, Amrita. We will pick this one up. Actually, we're going to schedule this one for a vote is what we're going to do. So that will be the next item on this. Next step on this application at 589 Fulton Street. And Ryan, let's move on to the next.
Sure. So for future votes for today, later today, Monday, June 26th, we had the Kings Highway self-storage was on our agenda. That has been withdrawn. We also have 1400 Story Avenue. This is York Studios. I believe Camilla is here with the agency recommendation. We'll get that up.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
The Department of City Planning recommends the approval of the proposed actions for 1400 Story Avenue. These actions would facilitate the development of the second phase of the York Studio campus in the Bronx, help create local jobs in the film industry, and help further the agency's goals for public access to the Harlem River waterfront. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Osorio.
Thank you. I have a quick question before we vote. I'm wondering if there was any response to the Borough President's recommendation to do something on the facade facing the proposed open space. There was a recommendation to consider some type of public art or some type of green wall, given the fact that that's one of the specific requests, right? To expand the requirement to extend the continuation of that building. So I'm wondering if there was any response. I guess that's the first part of the question. But the second part of the question is whether that's something that we can elevate or highlight in our report, that there's been a recommendation from the Borough President to do that.
For the first part of the question, I'm not sure if there's anything in writing that states that the applicant will make any changes to the facade. I am not sure about the second question, but
typically, I'll have to take a look at the report, and I'm not sure what language we had about this aspect of the Borough Presidents. It's not typically, I think, something, since it's not in the public, it's not in the PAA, the WPAA that we're approving, but it's something that we could say something to the along lines of, Commission encourages them to think about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sometimes flags it for the council, who has more leeway on things like that.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Camila.
Okay. For Wednesday, June 28th, 2023, staff have prepared reports for 1160 Flushing Avenue, the Greenpoint Landing Parcel 5C2, Warner Street Commercial Development. And then also scheduled for decision on Wednesday is 56 William Avenue, 37 Fairview Place, 4683 Amboy Road, 356 Bradford Avenue, and 5 St. James Place. All of these are actions pursuant to special districts on Staten Island. If there's any questions on those, I will also check the Zoom.
Let's move on.
Okay. And finally, for post-hearing follow-up, we have the Madison Square Garden special permit and the arena text amendment, and Stephen Johnson is here to present.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So as Ryan mentioned, this is a post-hearing follow-up from a 6.5-hour public hearing that was held on June 7th. The hearing is related to an application by MSG Arena LLC, who seeks a special permit pursuant to Section 7441 as modified by the proposed arena text amendment. The special permit would continue to allow MSG to operate as an arena with a capacity of over 2,500 seats. This action is in conjunction with an application by the Department of City Planning for a text amendment to the same zoning resolution, Section 7441. And that's in order to update and strengthen the findings for the special permit as it relates to public space loading and the consistency and compatibility of existing and future improvements to transit facilities in the project area. And I'm here to discuss the latest developments for both applications. Next slide, please. So included in your briefing packages are a number of documents, some of which are responses to Commissioner questions and issues that were raised at the public hearing. I would like to specifically discuss letters from MSG and DOT. And then we have two other items on the agenda related to modifications to the proposed text amendment and design strategies. Next slide, please. So MSG has sent in a series of 4 letters. The first letter relates to the applicant's commitment to work with the rail agencies and collaborate on improvements to Penn Station, including on the mid-block driveway, which is also formerly known as the taxiway, and on improvements to 8th Avenue entrances to Penn Station and MSG. While the letter is outlined as a commitment to cooperate, it more or less functions as a list of complaints focused on the rail agency's plan, as a conceptual framework and a design with undefined commitments. The second letter is related to the potential additional improvements to the public realm. The applicant is proposing an updated signage scheme that will establish a hierarchy of signage and a unified design. They have proposed a design for the 8th Avenue facade, the blank frontage that we've talked about. They've added an additional planter on the southeast corner of the site, which is just off of 31st Street in the mid-block, and enhanced lighting, an assessment of metal barricades that are ubiquitous on the site, and to coordinate with Department of Transportation any related improvements to the sidewalk areas. Additionally, they noted that that adding vertical elements is not possible due to the limited depth of the structure between the at-grade level and the Penn Station roof, which is apparently 5 inches, and would result in waterproofing issues if they were to do that, and they would have to also coordinate with the rail agencies to try to put in some support structures. The third letter is related to loading operations. So as you may recall, the proposed text amendment by the department created a finding related to loading. In their application, MSG submitted a loading plan, which was basically an existing conditions document, and their application did not include any proposals for improving their loading operations. So it was keeping everything as is. So after further discussions, I'm happy to report that they've agreed to no parking or staging of trucks on 33rd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue. They will use flaggers or security personnel to walk trucks along 33rd Street that are coming into the loading area. And they will create a transportation management plan with the Department of Transportation. The TMP is focused on loading operations and making improvements where possible. So the TMP will look at off-site, off-street locations for vehicle staging, design locations for security checks and or screening of trucks, managed access and restricted hours of vehicular traffic. Their final letter is focused on the restrictive declaration that is connected to their special permit application and the issue of conveyance of property interests. So this is a topic that the applicant reiterated a number of times at the public hearing. The department maintains that anything related to property issues between entities is a private business issue and unrelated to the findings and conditions of the application or the land use process. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a proposed new finding related to the arena loading operations, and loading might have planning impacts on the public space, the pedestrian environment, and movements, the functioning of streets and transit facilities. This is especially true if an arena has outdated and inadequate loading facilities with space for only 6 or 7 trucks when you have events coming in with, up to 24 trucks on the site. So the finding requires a loading operations plan that will be reviewed by the Department of Transportation and Department of City Planning and other affected rail agencies who can then review the plan and submit a report and recommendations to the Commission for your consideration. Now, the rail agencies submitted a compatibility report to the Commission prior to the public hearing, and that report is also up on our website, as well as these letters that I've been talking about. And MTA and Amtrak presented at the hearing. So now DOT has submitted their letter to the Commission, which outlines the transportation management plan. So the TMP reviews and establishes parameters for loading operations. MSG will have to be working with DOT's policies and goals outlined in these 3 reports that are listed here, the Truck Smart, Delivering Green, and off-hour deliveries. And in their letter, the Department of Transportation explicitly mentioned a few areas that they will be reviewing and discussing related to, like I said, off-street access, off-site access, managed hours, etc. Next slide, please. So as a result of the uncertainty around MSG signing onto a restricted declaration, as outlined in their letter to the Commission, The department is proposing an additional modification to the arena text amendment, which you can see here up on your screen. This is added on to the existing proposed text, and this is all the new material that is being proposed. So this proposed text amendment will create these two specific chair certifications if MSG continues not to want to sign off on the RD. And if they do decide to sign off on the RD, then this would negate the need for these chair certs. But in either case, whether through the RD or a chair certification process, MSG will be submitting information that details their design and loading operations that will need to be reviewed for consistency against their commitments during this process. The process would be that if the special permit application is approved, the Commission may request that within 6 months of the approval that MSG would have to submit an application for these two chair certifications. Next slide, please. So moving on to the public realm goals and strategies. We have a few slides to show on these. We want to review some of these materials with the Commission about what the department has been working on in relation to design and public realm in this area, and that we've been messaging to MSG and some ideas and concepts that could work in and around the area. So the two boxes on the left in the lighter pink color are more centered around their own property, and while the two on the right in the more purplish color revolves around coordination with other stakeholders like DOT and MTA. So you're already familiar with a lot of these concepts because we've discussed them here specifically for this project. These are things like landscaping, amenities, public space, public movement, blank walls, sidewalk widenings, etc. But I also want to mention that these goals are consistent with the work that we've always been doing recently in this area. Next slide, please. So on the left, we have MSG's proposed public realm in plan. And on the right, we have their new updated version with reconfigured layout in the northwest corner, which is 33rd and 8th, some graphic and lighting improvements on the 8th Avenue frontage, and an additional shaped planter bench in the southeast corner. Next slide, please. So these are 3 new illustrations that they sent in, and they show what some of these changes are. So on the left, you can see that there's a new Penn Station sign in white letters with blue background. This is on the 33rd and 8th corner. The center image illustration in the proposal is the blank wall condition, and they've added the Penn Station text in arrows in north and south directions. And then in the illustration on the right, you can see the additional planter bench. So now there are 3 planter benches instead of 2. And I just remember when I first saw this design that they showed us, I actually thought, well, it's starting to look like a public space now. It's starting to have some of that feeling. You have people that could sit and face each other, and you have some idea of a nice amenity for the space, I think. Next slide, please. So our urban designers, Joss Manow and Rich Wang, made some 3D illustrations for us so we can have an idea of some of the different possibilities that are available in the area to show some design concepts for this one corner on 8th and 33rd. And we're starting here with the existing conditions. So you can see the 3 trucks that are parked in the lay-by lane, the bollards. You have a series of awnings. If it were in color, these would be blue because all these separate awnings that they have that are inconsistent and kind of ununiform. They're not uniform awnings. Stick out and they're blue. And then you have the Penn Station entrance in the middle, which is very underdeveloped and very minimal. Next slide, please. So the next 3 slides are just design strategies and concepts applied to the site. So focusing on strategies within the boundaries of the property. So now you can see how there could be more uniform and consistent design to the structures, the awnings, and that could also extend to the text on the sign. So there's actually a design plan and a uniformity, and it removes the visual clutter and the different types of shapes to the awnings. And also there's a clear hierarchy to this concept here. So you have the most prominent feature being that larger entrance in the middle there. So you can see that that's the main entrance into the building. So during this process, we have been talking about the civic importance of the site, and then we wrote it into the proposed text. So again, we see this as an opportunity for something that enhances the space and identifies the space for what it is. So the public realm is not just about benches and trees, but it's also about all elements of the building together, such as streets, buildings, and other open spaces that contribute to the area. Next slide, please. So this slide focuses more on the coordination with other agencies, this in particular with DOT and the rail agencies, with the redesign of the sidewalk and roadway here, by pushing out the curb and creating more space for pedestrians and commuters. Now, the realigned curbs that you see here could complement the transportation management plan that's being proposed by physically restricting or limiting vehicles from areas that they can occupy today. So these bollards could also be redesigned to incorporate amenities like landscaping or seating, and this further enables the push to create a shared street on 33rd. And as a reminder, MSG has agreed to not stage or park trucks on 33rd Street. Next slide, please. So 8th Avenue and 33rd Street is more than just a corner and a sidewalk. It's about a broader corridor of key spaces that can include both sides of MSG and Penn Station and Moynihan Station across the street, and all these open spaces as seen together. So these are examples that utilize vertical design elements that have proven successful, not only in marking entry, but establishing an identity in the place. So the new LIR gateway is right next to the arena on 7th Avenue and 33rd Street. So the obvious question is, could something similar go on the other side at 8th Avenue and 33rd Street? And then you have a connection, it's cohesive, it's a comprehensive design, and it's unified. So the photo on the right shows Barclays Arena, which is also connected to a major transit hub, the Atlantic Terminal, and they have a nice, very nice vertical element there. We're not suggesting that they build a massively heavy, difficult, some item here, a gateway entrance here, but we're just coming up with concepts and strategies. Next slide, please. So one other way that you could help with the identity of a place is with a canopy, and that can take advantage of the height, mark entry into a place, and help establish that identity that we're looking for. So there's a range of examples here. Some of these are massive, but they don't need to be massive. So canopies don't necessarily have to have an attachment to the ground level. They don't have to have structures that are in between that, what MSG says is a difficult area, because there's only 5 inches there, but you could have them protruding out of the building, and then that can mark the identity of the place. Next slide, please. Lighting is another example of something that you can do in the area that can achieve these goals that we're looking for at the corner. And here's just some examples of some lighting elements with light sculptures and fixtures. And the last slide, please. Next slide. So in reference to the 8th Avenue blank walls, we have a couple different examples here of some dynamic wall treatments that respond to views from multiple locations. So depending on if you're north or south, far or close, so we're sitting on the Moynihan steps, you have a different view and a different perspective. So that ends my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen. Let me just run through a few things just to make sure that I'm on the same page with you and that we're all on the same page together, because it seems like there are a couple of areas in which we've seen some progress, and then there's a variety of areas in which not a whole lot has changed since the public hearing, or dare I say, in the last 10 years. So first, on the perhaps the most positive note, on the traffic and traffic management piece of this discussion. 10 years ago, there was no traffic management plan, and there was no direction for trucks that was built into this process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So since our hearing, MSG has committed to not park or stage trucks on 33rd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, something that we addressed with them live in this room. They agreed to use flaggers and security personnel to walk vehicles along 33rd Street as they enter and leave. And they will coordinate with Department of Transportation to actually create and get approval of a traffic management plan for loading.
That's right.
So those are three things that are new in this process.
That's right.
However, they're not things that will be complete by the time that this commission is being asked to vote on this special permit application. Is that also correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Is that what has prompted the department to propose adding language in the text amendment to allow for continued review for traffic management plan down the line?
Essentially, that's correct, yes.
Okay. All right. On to the restrictive declaration letter. They sent this letter to us saying that they would not sign a restrictive declaration because they wanted to make sure that the restrictive declaration said that they would never have to give anything up for less than the fair market value of their property. Is that essentially what the letter says?
Yes.
And that language is not one which is, this commission and the Department of City Planning does not ordinarily define business terms of any agreement between two entities outside of the official process. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So it wouldn't be unusual. I recognize that language about fair market value has existed in the past in this conversation, but it also would not be unusual for us to not make any reference to the business terms of what might exist down the line between MSG and the rail agencies. Is that right?
It's more than not unusual. It doesn't happen, and there's this one example that they're pointing to.
Okay. All right. So, all right, that's restrictive declaration. Then there is the commitment letter, which I don't think I can fairly call a commitment to anything. Well, let me ask you: did you see a commitment from MSG in this letter to do anything in particular?
Well, the commitment is the same commitment they made at the public hearing, which is to work with whoever they need to work with, and that is a commitment. But we were hoping that there could be something more attached to that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, some of this is within our ability as the commission to require in our own commission's report and work. So there is that. It is a commitment to collaborate with the rail agencies, but the details matter, and they don't appear to care for any of the details. Okay. Last is the design. I want to, first of all, thank you and Rich and Josh for giving some direction to the applicant as to how we think about unifying that corner and that intersection, something which has really been missing in this conversation to date. But let's talk about where we were, where we are, and where we may be headed as it relates to design. So the existing proposal pre-hearing included new pavers, some planters and benches,
yes,
some enhanced lighting at the west-facing exterior wall along 8th Avenue, and some bike parking, 20 bicycle racks, correct?
Yes.
Okay. They have now additionally proposed some more. This is much like the traffic management plan and the other traffic improvements. There are some additional positive changes here. They suggest a hierarchy of signage to give Amtrak more space to identify Penn Station above the existing Penn Station canopies on 31st and 33rd Street. Unified design language, which I think is not entirely inconsistent with what you presented before, although this is not something that we have before us yet. A design proposal wayfinding along the 8th Avenue side to tell you where Penn Station is with words.
Or treatment to that blank wall, some sort of treatment to make it more engaging and interesting and not just a box.
Okay, good. And then modified design for more tree planter benches on the southeast corner of the site, and also, I think, another planter and bench on the northwest corner of the site. Is that right, or was that just
planter benches on the southeast corner? And
that's new.
They have 3 now instead of 2.
Yep.
And they've added some just landscaping. It's not. There's no seating. It's just a planter that's in one location.
Okay. And they will assess use of, there'll be enhancement of lighting around the perimeter. Mm-hmm. And they will assess the use of metal barricades as to when they're needed for safety. Okay. You know, obviously that's actually a very big, if we were together collectively, us, MSG, the rail agencies, able to move those bollards in a meaningful way, that actually would significantly improve the pedestrian experience. But okay, so those were the changes that have come since the hearing, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And then the big question is, we do not have a proposed unified design from MSG that would necessarily answer all of the questions with the clock ticking. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Is that what animates the department's desire to add another piece of process in the text amendment to allow for us to continue to evaluate this part of the application?
It is, but it's not just necessarily that one element. So if they're taking a more comprehensive approach and design strategy, then other issues can come up and they can make other improvements, you know, once they do an actual look at how to improve that. So, for example, you mentioned the Penn Station signage. There's also MSG signage. I mean, why wouldn't they want to have some sort of working together relationship and establishing signage plans that something works well? Why can't their signage work well with Penn Station and vice versa, right? Because MSG signage on those awnings, they're different shapes and different sizes, and they have a look of like, you know, they can take them down in 5 minutes if they want. They can put them back up. So that's kind of an element that could be something that they could put into something at a future design cert. We don't want to limit them as to what they could actually propose. So if they're proposing something more of a civic gesture, and just thinking off the top of my head, if there's certain signage things that they're proposing and they don't meet our signage regulations, or they do meet them, but if they don't, then we'd have to look at how that impacts what they're proposing. So there's just a lot of variables in play here, and we want to make sure that we can get as much of an excellent design out of this.
Okay, last question for me. On the traffic management plan, the sorts of things that could be included in a traffic management plan, obviously progress has already been made by taking trucks from sitting on 33rd Street in the future. But a traffic management plan would define perhaps the hours of day in which trucks can come and go. Is that right?
It could. There's all sorts of parameters for it. You could have different security stations with different entry levels into 33rd Street. You could propose time restrictions for certain types of trucks. Say, for example, there are no box trucks coming in anymore, or there are a lot of box trucks coming in. You might want to have a plan related to those trucks coming in because there's congestion on the street from them. You could restrict hours of operation, of access onto 33rd Street for trucks, large trucks or medium-sized trucks, so you could get different size trucks. So there's all sorts of different things you can do. And you could be taking taking data from all those vehicles that are coming in, and then you can make an even more strategic transportation management plan after a year of getting all that data in.
Okay, well, that will be an important part of this process, something that it has yielded for sure. Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you, and thank you, Stephen, for the materials that you've provided, that have been provided to us in response to the hearing. But I do need to say that I'm uncomfortable with this process, that what we have before us is a special permit for one entity, which is MSG, and all of our discussion is about another entity that's not before us, and about which we can't really make any requirements or judgments or conditions. I mean, for instance, as I said, I really wanted to see the railroad's plans for what's going to happen from 7th Avenue all the way to the Moynihan Station, which they are not providing. And I find that very difficult. I know that they're not before us, but that's really who we're talking about. So planning without them seems difficult. And then trying to control the entity that is before us, that can't make any commitments about what or what won't happen in the future with the entities that aren't in front of us, is just confusing. But I would still reiterate, and I have gone up twice in the past week and spent a good 2 hours going through all the different levels and the new, I mean, I don't know what the new entrance on 7th Avenue looks like, but right now, with all of the construction, you can't tell what is going to be and how. They did tell us before that the majority of entries to Penn Station are through the 7th Avenue side, not the 8th Avenue side. And so it's hard for me not being able to see what that could look like and how that would relate to having the atrium over the transitway. It's hard, and I guess, I mean, you guys must have that problem too. It's hard to understand how any of this is going to fit together.
Sure. So I would just reference that in 2013, there was also plans from MTA for improvements on the site, and they were not as interesting or impactful as what they're proposing now. But those did not happen. So what I think the Commission is looking at now is how MSG can address their loading situation, their public realm situation, and all the different elements that are within their control, right? That's something they do control. They're saying we're not going to park trucks or queue them on 33rd. Right. That has nothing to do with MTA.
I agree. I think the transit plan that you've worked with them and coming up with DOT and a transit plan is a great step forward.
Right. And then there's the element that we discussed previously, which is the trigger that when there's a design concept that's 30% complete, that MTA has a design concept and they have their documents, that MSG would come back with that plan, and then that discussion happens.
And so what happens if there isn't one? And let's say we give them 3 years, and the MTA and Amtrak have not come up with a design plan that's 30% complete. Then what?
Exactly. I mean, this is what happened in 2013.
I know.
I mean, like I said, the MTA has moved on to a better, more impactful plan, but the findings and the conditions have to be viewed as if those plans are not happening, right? You have to view what's happening now, the existing conditions, what the applicant is proposing, and how they can meet those findings and conditions. So the dilemma is we all hope that they come to an agreement with the rail agencies, but also we've written into our, either into the CPC report or the RD, that there is a window. So for example, if there was a 5-year term for the special permit, if they come back to the commission and say, we don't want to put in these planter benches because we've come to an agreement with MTA. We don't want to spend millions of dollars with new paving and then have it ripped up. That completely is logical and makes sense. So there is flexibility there. So if they come to an agreement, then they don't have to, they come back and make that investment. So then they would have to move forward with the MTA plan or whatever plan that comes in.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. It's just, I guess I'm very suspicious of everybody in this. I think there's nobody with clean hands. And I'm not sure there's anybody who's really concretely forward-looking about what should happen here. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of Moynihan Station on Google, and there's lots of outside space, completely unimproved. There's no public realm there. So it doesn't seem to me that Amtrak has some commitment to the public realm either. And as you said, in 2013, we did include, and there was included space for Amtrak, et cetera, to have an entryway and signage for the entryway that they chose not to use. So I'm frustrated. And I know that's not you. You've done a great job, and your staff and the staff of city planning has done a great job. I just don't know how to make this grand vision for something any more likely. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, let's see if there are other questions, comments. Okay, Commissioner Goodridge, Commissioner Osorio.
Oh, wait, they're not working. I just have a very quick question just to like quadruple check, which I'm sure I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. So just in the circumstance that we don't approve the permit, it doesn't mean that Madison Square, doesn't mean that the owners have to use it, just have to move. It just means that they would have to use it as something else.
Well, they could use it for an arena of less than 2,500 seats, or they could redevelop as appropriate under the zoning.
Okay. How many seats does it have now?
It has 20,000.
22,000.
22,000.
So it could still operate as an arena.
That's much smaller.
They would argue to you that a 2,500 seat arena is
2,500. Oh, I thought.
No, 2,500.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I thought we were talking about. Okay.
2,500 versus 22,000. Yeah.
All right. That's like a public school. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Osorio.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for all your the information and guidance on this, and thank you for that summary. I thought that was really useful. I had two quick questions. One was in terms of that window. Can you help us understand what that window of flexibility really is? How we take advantage of that, or how can we productively use that to reflect some of the concerns, but also be realistic about sort of like the different timeframes and so forth? Can you help us explain
which window?
The window of opportunity that allows us to establish some concerns and some clear goals in terms of some of the issues as they stand now, understanding that they won't be addressed now, but should be addressed once the other sort of like proposals begin to clarify.
Sure. So the basic way is through the CPC report. All those items that are of interest to the commission would be detailed in that report. So, whatever the issue is that you would want to highlight. And then coming back, they have the chair search, the proposed mod is for the chair search for design and for the transportation management plan. And that's something that the department and the chair would then work with them and DOT in the case of the TMP to get an appropriate improvements to the site.
Thank you, but just to make sure I understand, and thank you again for your help in helping us understand this exactly in terms of how to proceed. Are you referring to specific conditions that we can include in the report, or are you talking about stronger language, or what type of language do you think could be included in the report in terms of just generically, just to understand what type of
I mean,
framing?
if, like, for example, you wanted to state that they should come up with an entrance to MSG and Penn Station that is purposeful and well-designed and thoughtful, then you would say that in the CPC report. If you wanted to, say that, you hope the transportation management plan restricts all cars and trucks everywhere for all time, you could say that too. I'm kidding, but, you have that flexibility to make those statements about what you want to put in there.
Okay, it sounds like conditions. We can establish conditions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. And then my last question is just a clarification question. In the revised design, the wayfinding along 8th Avenue, is this literally the sign with the arrows, or is there something else in terms of the facade treatment that is improving the wayfinding? I didn't understand that.
So in their current new proposal on 8th Avenue, it's the sign that says Penn Station and then arrows on each side. So
that's it?
Yeah, so it's the sign saying where Penn Station is, and then I guess you could call that wayfinding into an entrance. So
thank you.
Again, we hope that something would be more, impactful in that realm.
Thank you. You're just describing their response, their proposal, their response. Yeah. Thank you.
That's right, and I think a lot of us shared your reaction that you just had. So we don't have much time here. So I would, encourage the applicant to continue to engage with you, Stephen, and the department as we get to into the final days. We are voting on this application on July the 12th, and commission reports and things like that need to be finished and baked sometime before then. So we're really kind of at the end of the process. So, but we do have a few more days. So we'll see what sort of progress we can make between now and then. Commissioner Benjamin.
My last question, sorry, I don't mean to, but have any of the rails proposed what signage they would like? Other than the whole plan to take down MSG and start again, but with this application, have they proposed anything about signage or wayfinding that they think would be desirable, that we can go back to MSG and say, this is what we want?
No, they have not.
Can we ask them?
I think it's getting very late in the process.
Okay.
Stephen, I would note, and just for the benefit of the commission, that since we have been sitting here, the governor and the MTA and elected officials stood in Penn Station and said that they were going to commit to funding a reconstructed Penn Station separate and apart from any GPP resources generated by private commercial development. And as part of their press release, released some new images that are things that they might envision for this as a concept. Now, these are just visions. These are not, this is nothing that we can really hang our hat on. But I would note that it does give a little bit more detail on what they are envisioning as they go through their design process, which of course is really in its infancy and wouldn't even trigger our future conversation until it's at 30%. But there are some new images that have just popped up in the last hour and a half while we've been sitting here. So I just want to note that for your benefit as to what they're thinking and what their preliminary vision is. So
thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay. We'll look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you very much, Stephen, for all of your efforts on this. We really appreciate it. Okay. Let's see. All right. Edwin. What's next, if anything, on our review session agenda for today?
We're done with today's review session agenda, Chair Garodnick.
Okay. Shall we kick off another event?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have a special public meeting today, Commissioners. Good afternoon. This is the City Planning Commission special public meeting held remotely through the NYC Engage portal and in person at the CPC Hearing Room, 120 Broadway, Lower Manhattan. Today is Monday, June 26, 2023. I will now call the roll. Chair Garodnick.
Here.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Present.
Commissioner Bozorg is absent. Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Crowell.
Present.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Gold. Here. Commissioner Goodrich.
Here.
Commissioner Kamani is absent. Commissioner Marin.
I'm here.
Commissioner Osorio.
Here.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the public meeting of Wednesday, June 7th, 2023.
Great. On the minutes, I make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Chairman seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved.
Commissioners, the next item is the reports section on page 4. Reports. Borough of the Bronx, calendar numbers 1 through 4. CD 9, calendar number 1, C230145ZSX. Calendar number 2, C230070MMX. Calendar number 3, N230142ZAX. Calendar number 4, N230143ZAX. In the matter of an application for a special permit, city map amendment, and for the grant of authorizations concerning 1400 Story Avenue, York Studios. For favorable report on calendar numbers 1 and 2, and for the adoption of calendar numbers 3 and 4. Chair Garodnick.
I vote aye.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
I just want to say I am glad that York Studios is making an investment in such a vital area of the city's economy in the East Bronx. I did, however, find that given their close proximity to the public school, that their level of outreach was underwhelming. So in casting an affirmative vote, it is my hope that the borough president as well as local officials will continue to monitor the project and the expansion and continue to advocate that there be a greater, a more enthusiastic response between York Studios and the public school that is located literally next to them. I vote yes.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Aye.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Crowell.
Yes, but I want to strongly echo the sentiments of Vice Chair Knuckles regarding the school and outreach and the profound opportunity that the project presents to that community.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Gold.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich.
Yes, I also want to echo the sentiments of Vice Chair Knuckles, and also Commissioner Marin had also made some great statements during the review session. And the community board has also listed 6 items that I strongly agree with as well, which all of them relate to community outreach and also jobs, making sure that this project results in jobs in the community and union jobs. Thank you.
Commissioner Marin.
So thank you for that, everyone. I certainly echo comments made by Commissioners Knuckles, Crowell, and Goodrich. This studio does represent a very different tone and a very interesting opportunity for the Bronx, where we were once written about so negatively in movies like Fort Apache. We now have an opportunity to rewrite that story and to create movies in our borough that the entire world would be able to see. Second phase really represents more economic growth, the final development of the site that has been fallow for many years. It's developing 280 new jobs, and I certainly do admire their commitment to local hiring. I do concur that while the 8-foot fence, which is not it is not part of what the waterfront access plan calls for, does continue the design continuity of the existing fence and the existing campus. So on that, I can bow and say, yes, I don't have a problem with the 8-foot fence. There's still an issue with the southeast wall. There was an explanation in their letter to us, to the chair and commissioners, explaining that the tree canopy will sort of block the view of the lower portion of the facility, but there is an opportunity to do something at the upper portion, creating a green wall, something visually attractive where folks can either, who are boating on the river or passing on the highways or across the street, across the river, can see that would create some visual appeal. And lastly, I really need to continue to stress the connection to the school. I think this is a missed opportunity. I went to the High School of Music and Art, which afforded me many venues, and while I wasn't a film producer or a dancer, it exposed me to those elements. And I think that these children would benefit by having exposure to the film industry, learning directorship, production, cutting of film. That would be a real advantage and a game changer for this campus. And I sincerely hope that you will consider continuing to research that option. With that, I vote yes.
Commissioner Osorio.
Thank you. I vote yes. I concur with what my colleagues have said. In addition to really emphasizing the importance of stronger outreach, I want to explicitly request that there's a stronger connection to the environmental justice movement in this area, and also that we say something about that in our report. That's one point, and the other point that I had stressed earlier in the meeting, or in the previous meeting, had to do with actually elevating the previous to last point that Commissioner Marin raised right now, which is the importance that, there's been recommendations from the borough president in terms of doing something with that wall, and I think that we can elevate that in our report as well.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Recused.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 1 and 2, and calendar numbers 3 and 4 have been adopted.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. Is there any other business before the commission today?
Just one minor item for the record. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 5 and 6 have been withdrawn. With that, we are done.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for your time today. This special public meeting is now adjourned. We'll see you all Wednesday. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Time is 4:21 p.m.
Oh, yes.